Gnoggin.
Be it Duracell batteries in Pikmin, or tons of Pizza Huts in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, product placement is found in video games just as it is TV and movies. From the humorously blatant to the distracting and face-palming, these are my personal top 6 favorite examples. Why 6?
Why? Why not?
Billboards in racing games is a normality now, but did you know that it started all the way back in 1983 with the game Pole Position? This game had the usual ads for pizza and soda, but it even had ads for cigarettes and alcohol. You won't see those in any game anymore. Too edgy for kids. The makers of Homefront said they used real-world companies to add realism, rather than for advertising. I would believe them if they didn't have them all over the place. White Castle, Hooters, Full Throttle, Tiger Direct, billboards of those everywhere. I'd call it more distracting than realism. The war can wait. I'm going to Hooters. Splinter Cell Chaos Theory has the same deal going on, but now the blatant product placement is even more obvious, with logos facing right at you, products perfectly placed, especially in the case of Airwave's gum. Though the game also has ads for Axe, AMD, and Nokia. Remember those phones? Oh, I'm old. Alan Wake was creative in having a pretty good ongoing TV series within the game series. But what's on TV? Commercials. And there's no DVRs in Alan Wake, so you're stuck watching them. There's a full-on Verizon commercial, and some Night Springs video game footage on a TV with an Xbox 360 next to it. But not all of its ads are on a TV. You drive a Lincoln with a Microsoft sound system. Your phone is by Verizon, and there's a bunch of billboards. And you use Energizer batteries for your flashlight, though it's not a very good ad for those. Your flashlight dies all the time. Mountain Dew and Doritos have become a staple in Call of Duty and Halo advertising, but aren't usually seen in-game. Game they are seen in, though? Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, which also advertises Axe. Here's what the cans looked like in Japan at the time, and in-game, oh look, Mountain Dew. Oh look, a perfectly intact Doritos bag, in the middle of the jungle! Oh hey, Pepsi Nex. I didn't know they had that in the 1970s! There's product placement that is just there. Pizza Hut and Crazy Taxi, Burger King and Fight Night, Obama and EA Sports. Then there's product placement in a game that's used as an important part, such as the life-saving Energizer batteries in Alan Wake. And then there's this game, on a whole nother level of that. The magic system in Darkened Sky is based on the use of Skittles. You heard me right. The magic in this magical world where you use magic powers is powered by Skittles. You perform different magic spells by using various color combinations of Skittles. Skittles is very much the entire point of the game, and this isn't some Flash game on Neopets. This isn't a game about a product mascot like Pepsi Man. This is a full PC and GameCube game that didn't need to be about Skittles. But it is now. Entirely. Gamers, just like every other type of people, can achieve great and amazing things. Crazy things! Here are 5 of them. Buttons is what video games are, and no amount of Kinect can change that. The average person can press a single button around 7 times per second tops. The average gamer around 10 to 12 if you practice and get the hang of it. Now meet Takahashi Meijin. He worked at Hudson Soft in the 80s and 90s in the marketing division, and he set the world record for the most button presses per second, at 16. That was him doing it in his elderly years. Wow! While scores don't really matter much anymore, back in the days of the arcade, they were everything. If you were number 1 in the arcade, it meant you had some sick skills. You were the raddest gamer around. The big competitive game to get the high score over is the original Donkey Kong. It's so big that they actually made a movie about it. Meet Steve Wiebe, the current holder of the highest score, and one of the few people to even make it to the last level of the game. And this game doesn't have a last level. The programmers just stopped working on them, so this level has a huge glitch that will just make your character die. Getting to this level just kills you, because the programmers didn't bother finishing it. The record used to be held by Billy Mitchell all the way back in 1982, with a score of 1,050,200. And this is a game where you make points by only a few hundred at a time, and a few thousand if you beat a level fast enough. But In 2010, Steve Wee beat his long-lasting high score, and set the new record at 1,064,500. If you like retro gaming culture, you should definitely check this movie out, it's pretty good. With high scores not really a thing anymore, super competitive but wanting to play single-player games gamers started doing other things, like speedrunning. And just like how Donkey Kong was the game to have a high score on, Super Mario 64 is one of the games to speedrun, and using tools to speedrun is pure crap. There's nothing incredible about hacking a game to make it easily speedrunnable than speedrunning it. Anyway, the average time for completing Mario 64 with all 120 stars is around 30 hours if you don't suck at the game. Now meet Sigil Mike, the record holder for the non-tool assisted speedrun of Mario 64. He managed to get all 120 stars in 1 hour, 44 minutes, and 1 second. Look at all these tricks he has to do! It's crazy! For those of us who love devoting much of our time to a single game, but aren't skilled enough to do anything like get a high score or a record speedrun, there is marathoning. Meet Okinkaya of Australia. He holds the world record for the longest gaming marathon. He played Call of Duty Black Ops 2 for 135 hours, 15 minutes, and 10 seconds. That's over 5.5 days! And he was only allotted a few 10-minute breaks to urinate and stuff every few hours. There are people attempting to break this record all the time, but most of them fail, of course, passing out or even going to the hospital, and one guy even died. I find this to be the most impressive. Video game glitches happen all the time. Some people learned these and learn how to use them to their advantage. Pokemon Red and Blue was released in 1998, and later, in 2003, a glitch developed that allowed you to actually catch Mew. Mew was programmed as an event-only Pokemon. There is absolutely no way of catching one legitimately outside of the event. Or this glitch. Note, I said this glitch was developed, not discovered. I say developed because someone studied the game to its deepest levels of ones and zeros in its programming, and managed to find a way to derp the little computer chip into thinking you're battling Mew. You walk in front of this guy, this one specific guy, and pause the game the very millisecond you do so. This way, you get access to the menu before the programming in the game makes him initiate battle. It has his data loaded, and the data that you've walked into his path loaded, and so now he wants to battle you, and that data has been loaded. But the programming hasn't started to make him walk up to you and challenge you. Now you fly to Cerulean City, and see, this guy noticed him and he was about to start combat, but you flew away. Now, walking along Nugget Bridge, you must have already beaten most of these trainers, all but one of them. But when you walk in front of this one specific boy and battle him, beat him, then fly to Route 8, and walk along until your menu mysteriously pops up by itself. When you exit the menu, you will immediately start battle with Mew. What? What's happening is that the fragmented data left over from this fight you didn't do, plus the fight of this trainer's Slowpoke, plus the data of Route 8, equals the programming code that initiates a battle with Mew. The ones and zeros here just happen to be the same, and the idea that a guy dug so deep into the game's programming to figure this out is crazy. He used his noggin to the ultimate level. Sometimes game developers hide Easter eggs and references to other games they have made in years past, but sometimes they are more than that. Let's dig into Metroid and find its hidden lore with the game X. The Game Boy game X, or Exu in Japanese, was released in 1992, and at the time, it wasn't directly connected to any other Nintendo franchise. It was its own thing. Previously though, the game's director, Yoshio Sakamoto, created the Metroid series. At this point, however, the two games were not at all linked. Later on, though, the manga version of Metroid was released, which heavily referenced X. Then later still came Metroid Other M, which too uses elements from X that make it near certain that X is lore to Metroid. In the game X, you pilot a flying space tank ship called the Vxiv. In both the manga and Other M, the Vxiv is commanded by Adam Malkovich, this guy. In fact, the Vxiv is so important to Other M's story that without it, the whole series wouldn't work the same way at all. Sure, they could have made it any ship, but instead they made it the same one from X. This was the ship where Adam ordered to drop and leave behind a drive unit that was about to self-destruct, even though his younger brother was still on board trying to repair it. After this, Samus could not take any more of the Galactic Federation, and left, and soon picked up the job of bounty hunting, making Samus essentially who she is in the game. Also note the resemblance of the Training Academy coach from X and Adam Malkovich. I mean, sure, X's version is severely lacking in graphical detail, but this was polygons rendered on the Game Boy, so I think it has an excuse. Call it just a reference if you want. Either way, it's still a huge one, and in my mind, it's big enough to consider X a small piece of history in the Metroid universe. Ghost Recon and Hawks are 100% canon to one another. They share the same lore. Here's how. First off, both by Tom Clancy, so no huge surprise. But anyway, in the finale of Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2, you call an airstrike, and as planned, an airstrike comes and does its thing. But now if you go and play the game Hawks, one level has you going on an airstrike mission that has you attacking a place that seems very familiar. Almost as if you had been there on the ground in another game. Big plot device there. In Ghost Recon you do the recon work, and in Hawks you do the airstrike within the same exact mission. Meaning these two series are canonical lore to one another. Case closed. Hidden lore in a minute. Sometimes game developers like to hide little Easter eggs and references to their previously made games, or even whole other series. In most cases, that's that. It's just a fun little thing to get a cheap smile out of a player. But sometimes, when there's enough of the same kind of so-called Easter egg, it gets players like me thinking, are the game developers trying to get something across? Like that these two games are linked? In the same immediate universe? Canon to one another? Like in the case of Bungie's Halo series, and its connection with Pathways into Darkness and Marathon. Bungie released Marathon in 1994, competing with the other major shooter at the time, Doom. The game is an FPS set in the future, and you're a security officer trying to stop an alien invasion on a colony ship named Marathon. There are two others. One has you and an army investigating some ruins, and the other has you going into alternate realities. But the sci-fi theme and the being made by Bungie aren't the things that make some think it shares a universe with Halo. It's primarily the many times the Marathon logo appears in the Halo series. Most of them are simple nods, many of which are in pretty important places, but some of these references are huge. Like how in Marathon you wear Mjolnir Mark IV armor, and in Halo you wear Mjolnir Mark V and VI armor. And note how in Marathon you are a security officer. Well, the security officer armor in Halo even shares the same helmet type as the Mjolnir Mark IV in Marathon. So isn't this just an updated Mark IV version of it? Because Halo takes place in the future of Marathon? Now if that doesn't convince you right there, well then buckle up. In Marathon, you're in a Marathon colony cruiser. In Halo, there are many Marathon class cruisers. Marathon, whatever it is in the Halo universe, perhaps a company, since they classify ships, and have its logo in the middle of the Pillar of Autumn emblem, also give out medals, makes armor, weapons, and pipes. Why else would the logo be all over the place? They may even have a monopoly on this type of technology. The rocket launcher in Halo has SPNKR on the back, so do the rocket launchers in Marathon. Same model name? Serial number? Something. The Bumblebee cutscene in Halo, the pilot is wearing a helmet very similar to the protagonist of Marathon's helmet. Perhaps the older Mjolnir armor was passed down. Marathon logo on dashboard of a Warthog, on the plasma grenade, on the loading screen, on the difficulty shields as a decal, on the doors in the level Regret. By the way, we are in Halo 2 now. On the shotgun, the Enforcer's shields. On Africa! Just Africa! They own Africa! The entire courtyard on the Ivory Tower map. In this skull, on a bunch of doors. On a planet, in the sky. The sky! Marathon must be a pretty powerful company. Tons of weapons, including the optical sight, on elevator control panels, on ODST chest armor, in Guilty Spark's eye, on helmets, on butt plates, on airships, holograms, icons, monitors, body bags, backpacks, reflecting off of some surfaces. Just reflecting. So you see, you can't just say the Marathon logo being in Halo isn't just a small nod to their past games. Marathon obviously is a big part of the Halo universe. Since the logo is all over these things, I'm pretty sure they are a company that manufactures these things. The ship Marathon and Marathon may have been an early product of the company, and they have since began to create all kinds of things, either themselves or helping the UNSC in manufacturing. Despite this big list of just their logo in Halo, I'm not done yet. The maps Foundation and Gemini in Halo 2 are very similar to the maps in Marathon, perhaps only changed slightly as an update to the times. The personnel in Crow's Nest in Halo 3 wore outfits very similar to the Bobs in Marathon. There are all these things, and I'm not even counting the many lines in Halo that are also in Marathon, or the many plot devices and similarities they share. Plus, it's not like they couldn't exist in the same universe. What's preventing that? They both are in the same kind of setting. Evil aliens bent on destroying the galaxy, a super soldier type hero with a fancy future suit, and the same name and similar model. Well, there is one thing. Bungie. While Alex Soropian once said that John 117 and the protagonist of Marathon are the same person, Bungie, not Alex, later released a statement saying that that was false, and that the two series are in no way connected. Yeah, right. Tell that to the 100 or so Marathon references just in the main trilogy. They may not have meant that the games weren't in any way connected at all. They may have just been clarifying that Master Chief and the Marathon dude are not the same person, and are in no way connected whatsoever, even though they both wear Mjolnir armor. And besides, game companies fib like this all the time. Bungie may be saying they aren't connected, but what they say and what is actually there are two different things. Their games are full of connections. They may just be saying that to get people like me to talk about it on forums and make YouTube videos about it for free advertising. Clever, clever Bungie. Now, how does Halo connect to Pathways into Darkness? Well, not directly, but through Marathon. As in Marathon, you can read a bunch of stuff about the Marathon world on some terminals, and some of the history part explains the events of the series Pathways into Darkness. That one's pretty simple. So Halo has the hidden lore of the entire Marathon series, and Marathon has the hidden lore of Pathways into Darkness. Thus, Halo has Marathon and Pathways into Darkness lore, tucked away, hidden, in these hundreds of references. Even if you think Bungie isn't lying and Halo and Marathon aren't connected because they said so, then you are leaving this video still knowing that Marathon and Pathways into Darkness are connected. Through lore and stuff. Yeah. Totaka Kazumi is a Japanese composer and voice actor for many Nintendo games, all the way back from 1990 to today, and he likes to have fun. Totaka likes to have fun hiding his tune in every game he works on. It's become a treasure hunt for some of the more die-hard Nintendo fans. The first game he worked on was X, where if you visit the fake scientist in Mission 4 and don't touch any button for a full 40 seconds, you will hear... And that is Totaka's song. Next we go to Mario Paint, which has the easiest appearance of his song to find. Clicking on different letters on the title screen makes different things happen. And clicking this one... Next, it's Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins, where you have to wait at the game over screen for 2.5 minutes before you hear... In The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, or Link's Awakening DX, if you wait in the house filled with frogs for 2.5 minutes, you get to hear... After the end credits finish in Wario Land on the Virtual Boy, if you wait for just over a minute, you'll get it again. Waiting in the trial mode menu in Yoshi's Story for 2 minutes gives you this result. In Luigi's Mansion, going into the training room and waiting for 3 minutes. This is the most famous one. In Animal Crossing, the character KK Slider's Japanese name is Totakeke, similar to Totaka. If you ask KK to play KK's song on a Saturday night, he will play a modified version of Totaka's song. Then the player will get a recording of the normal version. This is the same in Animal Crossing Wild World, City Folk, and New Leaf. In Pikmin 2, you can hear it if you wait for 4 minutes on the treasure salvage screen after completing a cave. In Yoshi Touch and Go, on levels involving blowing away clouds, if you wait around for almost 4 minutes, it will start to play. And that's it. At least, that's all that's confirmed. Totaka has worked on plenty of other games, and fans are still digging into trying to figure those ones out. So where will it pop up next? Only Totaka himself knows. Croc! Remember this game? Great game. Noggin. Croc was originally Yoshi. Here's a quote from the developer of Croc. The end came when we pitched to do a 3D platform game, the likes of which had never been done before. We mocked up a prototype using Yoshi. It was essentially the world's first 3D platform game, and was obviously a big risk. Nintendo had never let an outside company use their characters before, and weren't about to either. This is the moment the deal fell apart. We later made the game into Croc, Legend of the Gobos, for the PlayStation, Saturn, and PC, which became our biggest game in terms of sales, and also in royalties, since we owned the IP. Shame that Nintendo turned it down. This game was a huge success, so much that it even got a sequel. A very disappointing one! But that's beside the point. The point is Croc really a crocodile? Or is he something more? Or less? Or the same but different? Well, let's take a look at him. A good difference between alligators and crocodiles is the direction their teeth go. Alligators show only their top teeth, while crocodiles show both. Well, Croc only shows one tooth, and it's facing down, so he could still be either. How about the snout? Crocodile snouts are much more pointed than alligators. Looking back to Crocs, that is the opposite of pointed. Score 1 for alligators. How about color? Croc is very, very green. But considering he's in a cartoony world, yeah, but still, he is green nonetheless. Crocodiles are more of an olive green, but alligators are much more a blackish or grayish color. Tally 1 for crocodile. When it comes to size, crocodiles are much larger. They are generally 4 to 5 meters, but can easily reach 7 or gator. Though there are also dwarf crocodiles that barely reach 1 meter. Alligators are generally 4 meters tops, though the largest one recorded was at 5.5 meters. Croc is very small, and yes, he is full grown. See? He grew up. So unless he's a midget, I'd say he's a dwarf crocodile in size. So tally up Croc again. Some may say that since Croc can survive in the ocean, he's a crocodile, because there are saltwater crocodiles. But the truth is, both species can live in saltwater just fine, no problem. But how about that habitat? Crocodiles live all over the place, while alligators only live in the southern United States, a little bit of Central America, and China. But how would we go about determining where this game takes place? Oh, look at the size of that bee! Terrifying! This must be the southern hemisphere. No, but really, look around. Grassy plains, rocky sandy desert with those cactuses, and Spanish-style architecture. This is most likely North or Central America. And then again, North and Central America is home to both crocodiles and alligators. But then again, that Arctic. Crocodiles would die fairly quickly in an area under 7 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, alligators can live plenty below that, even sticking their snouts out of the water before it freezes over so that they can still breathe when under the ice. Score 1 for alligator. Well, the scores are tied. Maybe he's just an odd mix. Perhaps his father was a crocodile and his mother was an alligator, and they had to abandon their child to the gobos in order to hide their forbidden relationship of interspecies love. Or maybe he's a caiman. Caimans are alligatorid crocodilians. They're both. They've got that rounded snout, those downward teeth, green, and with a yellow belly, can survive in fairly cold areas, live in Central America, have a dwarf variation that's only 1 meter long, and can survive in fresh and salt water. So yeah, Croc isn't a crocodile, he's a caiman. But just to take everything I've said and toss it down the drain, alligators, caiman, and crocodiles are all considered crocodilian. So none of this matters, another pointless video. Dang it! Dang it! When you get shot with an arrow, what is there to protect you? Your armor. especially heavy armor. Look at this. This guy is a tank. Nothing's getting to him. Now look at this armor. This is what we call a not tank. And yet this armor is still somehow effective. While definitely not as effective as this tank armor, it still functions perfectly fine at raising the defense level of the player, significantly. But it's obviously not covering anything. There has to be an explanation. Well, let's use our noggins for a bit. Female armor in mini fantasy RPGs and MMOs and MMORPGs is skimpy. It's so prevalent that it has become a norm, a cliché, a stereotype of video games. Sometimes it's so skimpy, you ask yourself, why? In some games, when you unequip your armor, your character puts clothes on, and they cover more than the armor does. How does taking off more armor raise your defense level? The higher up level armor shows more skin and is more effective. How? Look at what these girls are up against. Look at what you are fighting, Nariko. How do you think that will protect you? There has to be some sort of logical explanation. So let's start with the basics. Heavy armor greatly increases your armor rating. Obviously, it protects you from everything. The downside of it, though, is lack of maneuverability, and that you are carrying a lot more weight around. This is why the classes in these games, like the assassins, the thieves, and the archers, don't wear heavy armor. They wear light armor. While it may not protect them from a direct shot with an arrow, or a good swipe of the sword, it will protect them from the scratches and bruises that come along with running through a forest really fast. It protects their skin from sandstorms and sunburn, and it can be used as a sort of camouflage. But still, it somewhat limits the maneuverability of the wearer. So why not take more away? The ancient Greek knew that less is more when it comes to maneuverability and speed. During the foot races during their Olympics, their contestants would race naked. The lack of clothing made them faster. Less wind resistance, less weight to carry. Remember, they didn't have skin-tight runner's clothing like we have today. So this proves that less is more when it comes to speed and maneuverability, which many fighters want. But this doesn't explain why many of these armors that cover none of the vital organs still provide such a high defense rating. So look at this. This is the same armor on each gender in a game. They each have the same defense rating. Do these look like they should have the same defense rating? Games like Terra are famous, or infamous depending on your point of view, for this sort of thing. As is Baldur's Gate, World of Warcraft, there's plenty others. And even many games that have normal or reasonable armor on most characters always have that one woman with the sexy armor that's just as good as the rest of them. How? Well, here's my primary theory. Almost all the games that have this skimpy yet effective thing going on with their armor are fantasy games, or at least have some level of magic involved. So, perhaps there's some sort of unspoken enchantment on all the armor that some wizard came up with. It's like a shield that the armor provides, but it only affects the exposed skin on the wearer. And since most people don't like seeing big, hairy, ugly men wearing almost nothing, it was mostly the female warriors who chose to use the enchantment. When you think about it, it's kind of perverted on the wizard's part. Someone's got an armor fetish. Though this skimpy armor isn't restricted to just women. It's definitely more common on women, but there are plenty of games, again Terra, that have many sets of armor that flaunt the male body as well. Of course, they only show the really attractive males wearing this armor. Also, and the 80s were prevalent with this, many video game and movie testosterone-pumped muscle that will shoot you in the face with its fist type men were shirtless, and it's still somewhat prevalent today. So don't go saying it's one-sided, silly feminists. When a particular set of armor is revealing on both the males and females, it makes more sense. It may be a cultural thing for that class of warrior, like the barbarians. Or maybe the entire culture of the game involves skimpy armor. It's fine, as it's part of their world. Who are you to judge them in their fantasy world? Maybe it's too hot to be wearing too much armor or clothing. Many superheroes and supervillains don't wear much armor at all. They all stick to spandex, because it gives them maximum maneuverability, minimum weight of clothing, and intimidation through the sight of their massive muscles. Also, you don't really need armor when your skin is as hard as steel. or you heal in seconds, or you have a massive force field, or you can just dodge bullets. So if you don't really need armor and you're just gonna wear skin-tight clothing anyway, why not show a bit of skin? Or all of it? I'm pretty sure that's the logic that the supers used when deciding their outfits. Though maybe they thought they could use their bodies as a sort of sexual distraction to the fighting, which segues into my next point. Mai Shiranui's breasts. Let's take a look at them. A bit closer. Okay. You see how much they wobble? Why would anyone in a fighting competition move in such a manner unless they were trying to make them jiggle on purpose? Oh wait, she is doing it on purpose! She uses the ancient Asian technique of the kunoichi, the attractive female ninja. At the time, women were not warriors, but there were a choice few who were trained in the arts of ninjutsu, just as Mai was. They were also trained to use their gender as an advantage. Their shinobi shozokos, is that right? Would have easy access to expose their breasts, either partially or fully. Doing so would cause three things to happen in battle. First, it would confuse the opponent. Wait, what? A woman? What? Then, while not always, but often, it would make the opponent go a bit easier on the ninja, as women were seen as gentle, and not fighters, and especially not killers. This would also make the opponent show more mercy. So on the rare occasion that the woman loses, rather than being killed on the spot, she'll be disarmed and let go, or just arrested. And lastly, the bouncing barnacles would be a constant distraction to the enemy, which is the entire point of why Mai is purposely bouncing her bungalows. Sexual allure. Distraction. Which is another possibility of why skimpy armor is good. Sex appeal probably has a lot to do with it, and that would explain why it is primarily the female characters who wear such things. Most women would not be distracted in battle because of a man's rock-hard abs. If anything, it'd be intimidating, and thus give them more of an adrenaline rush, which would make them better. The only way I could think of male armor being distracting would be if it allows the dude's junk to fly around like a helicopter. How's that mental image? Luckily, not all games are filled with overly skimpy armor. Most make the female armor a bit more pleasing to the eye with a bit of skin showing, but for the most part keep it realistic. Characters like Shanoa from Castlevania I think are the best examples of a balance between attractive and functional armor. You see this? Full breastplate to protect her vital organs, and hip and knee and shin armor to protect any major damage to her leg joints. And she still has a bit of sex appeal going on, with the thigh and shoulders showing. Personally, I think this is much more attractive than this. But maybe that's just me. Bethesda does a good job with the female armor in their Elder Scrolls series. See these? Complete, full sets of heavy armor, and you can still tell that it belongs to a woman, even when you don't show the face. Because boobs. I think the elven armor looks very good on women in Skyrim. It shows their figure without showing their body. Bethesda did an excellent job. But then this happened. Mods. Now don't get me wrong, I love mods. I have over 100 on my Skyrim alone, but some of these are just... yeah. They took Skyrim and generalized the armor, making it look like another MMORPG. They even took the armor from Terra and imported it into Skyrim. And they even did so with Queen's Blade. Oh, Queen's Blade. This anime, how does it even work? Is there a plot to this at all, or is it just a bunch of ridiculously underdressed, massive cupped women fighting, and constantly cutting off each other's armor? How did you manage to get your kimono cut right on the butt? Well, if you're embarrassed by it falling off, then why are you wearing such a thing in the first place? Where is your... is it really behind that tiny thing? I sure hope it's not under that armor that's still there, or your lady lumps are lopsided. Also, why is your armor held on by a small strap and a loose belt? Is your hair groping you? How are those defying gravity? Fake. People can't even cosplay as these characters properly. They have to wear skin-colored bras underneath because these outfits are impossible! There are a few times where skimpy armor makes sense and is acceptable. But sometimes it's just game-breaking. Look at this. All these fully clothed pirates, and then boop! Here's their evil boss. Well, at least most armor, even the modded armor, covers the... You're covering everything except what you're supposed to be. You know, maybe there isn't a logical explanation. Maybe it's just because the game industry knows that every 12-year-old boy that sees a scantily clad woman on the box art will want the game immediately. Sex sells, after all, and the only explanation that I can think of is that skin-only enchantment on armor. And that's never touched upon in any game, it's just a theory. It's just the sex appeal. Which is fine, I guess, it's just sometimes it's too much. It's hard to deal with. Oh yeah! Time to look at naked Nintendo girls on the internet. Kirby. Kirby! What are you doing? Kirby! No! Kirby! Ah! Kirby! One of the most innocent and child-friendly games out there. Well, if you ignore the inhaling the souls of his enemies or ripping their bodies into pieces. In the cutest way possible. But this game isn't as innocent as it seems. There is full frontal nudity of a human female that Kirby puts his little pink puff ball body all over. But how can this be if all the Kirbys are child-friendly? Well, it's hidden. And at first glance, it's no naked woman. It's more like an abstract art portrait of a naked woman. It's in the game Kirby's Dream Land 2, or rather, Wet Dream Land 2. Am I right? Am I right? And it's on the secret stage in level 5-5. You enter one particular room and fall down it, and, well... Did you catch it? If you didn't, then you are way too innocent. Here's what the whole area looks like. Smiley face, boobs, with boulder enemies in them, innuendo, innuendo, belly button, and crotch, with little spiky, or rather, hairy, enemy in it. Some level designer is quite the perv. The year is 2006, and Square Enix releases its The year is 2006, and Square Enix releases its I did it again. The year is 2006, and Square Enix releases its dozenth pure Final Fantasy game. What many don't know is that this takes place on the same planet as one of their previous non-Final Fantasy games, Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story was released on the PlayStation in 2000. It was a dungeon crawler based in the continent kingdom of Valendia, which just so happens to be the same place Final Fantasy XII is based. Getting more into this game's geography, this continent is one of many on the planet Ivalice. This planet is also where Crystal Defenders and various Final Fantasy Tactics games take place. The connection to Vagrant Story is just the biggest due to it not being a Final Fantasy title. Also, looking at its art style makes it being super linked to Final Fantasy XII make even more sense. But anyway, all these games together makes what Square calls the Ivalice Alliance, an ever-growing continuity of various Final Fantasy games. And Vagrant Story. Mass Effect is one of those games that is full of lore and backstory and history. But one particular part of it is hidden away in the Kasumi DLC for Mass Effect 2. In it, you go to a basement that belongs to a very rich individual. He has a large collection of things from all around the galaxy. Statues of ships, actual ships, the head of the Statue of Liberty, statues of living things like this Krogan, and like this ogre from Dragon Age Origins. What? Now hold on, there are multiple ways this is possible. One is that Dragon Age is based in the past on Earth, hence the humans in Dragon Age. But Dragon Age isn't based on Earth, it's based in a fantasy land. Then why not some other planet? Maybe even before the most recent Reaper cycle. Or maybe even so far behind a number of Reaper cycles that it could be on Earth, just in the very, very far past. So it looked completely different. That would explain why in Mass Effect's Earth's history, elves and dragons didn't exist but were part of myth and legend in medieval times. Perhaps because they found some remains of some of them from the last Reaper cycle. Or, if Dragon Age is on another planet, humans could just be a form easily evolved into. After all, the majority of aliens in Mass Effect are human-shaped. Another theory is that a few people from the Dragon Age world survived and fled the planet during the Reaper attack, landing on Earth and essentially becoming Adam and Eve. But no matter what the case was, this statue of an ogre is in Mass Effect, meaning they are either still alive during Mass Effect's time, or they went extinct and this is its representation, much like how we have dinosaur statues today. The Last of Us takes place in the future of Uncharted. In the opening bar fight scene in Uncharted 3, go into the corner of the bar to find a newspaper with a headline, "Scientists still struggling to understand deadly fungus." So during the events of Uncharted 3, this deadly fungus was a new discovery that scientists were still studying. Then, down the line, it expanded, and society declined, eventually leading up to Naughty Dog's other game, The Last of Us, where the fungus has spread to take control of human bodies. Fungus zombies. Let's also look back at Uncharted Drake's Fortune. When the sarcophagus was opened and Gabriel inhaled the dust from the inside, he turned into one of those crazed zombies. While it may not exactly be the same fungus growing on this corpse, we know that in the Uncharted franchise there is some airborne substance that when inhaled causes zombification. The Last of Us fungus is just another one of these substances.
Do you ever think it's strange that despite there being 12 players on your team, there are only 9 different people, or less? The rest of them are copies, the same class, but not just the same class. This isn't like Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, where the face is covered, meaning it could really be anyone under that mask. This is Team Fortress 2. The closest thing to a mask is some glasses. Or an actual mask, but ignore that. And not only on your own team are there people that look exactly the same, but on the enemy team too. And none of these mercenaries have mentioned anything about that? It's not strange to them that exact copies of them are fighting them?
Noggin.
Deep inside the catacombs of TF Industries, with the power of Australium, they keep the original 9 mercenaries in a frozen stasis. Their DNA is being extracted and used to manufacture an army of mercenaries for hire, in the form of clones. Australium is what allows many previously impossible things to be possible. Invisibility, teleportation, and possibly even cloning. That is, cloning on this mass and super fast scale. Anyone with the money can hire as many of these mercenaries as they want. Reliable Excavation Demolition and Builders League United are no exceptions. When their rich owners started to squabble, they each bought as many of these clones as they could to have a full-on war with each other. The clones are then given color-coded outfits and perhaps some, accessories of choice. While in the clone pod, they are either given some mental stimuli to not think it's odd that they all look the same, or they full-on already know that they are simply clones. Humans to be bought and killed. These clones were also given some form of immortality. When powerful enough, the Medigun can raise them from the dead, even when exploded into 100 pieces. And even if a clone full-on dies, their consciousness continues into the next clone of them. This is confirmed by a few lines spoken in the game.
Hello again, dumbbell.
Welcome to the Velus once again fest.
I am coming for you again.
Aw, crap. Domination! Look it up!
Dominated, short pants.
The respawn counter could very well be just how long it takes to transact money from red or blue to TF Industries for hiring the next mercenary clone, and teleport that newly purchased clone with the previous memories uploaded into its brain out into the battlefield, to continue this non-stop war. A war that has killed millions of clones. Some say Ghastly is a dead Cloyster, because they are next to each other on the Pokédex and they look similar, if you remove the shell. But, no, not at all. There are so many Ghastlys all over the place. Pokemon Tower, Tin Tower, Sprout Tower, all the routes around it, Lost Cave, Eterna Forest, or White Forest. They are very common. What about Cloyster? Cloysters do not exist in the wild at all until Black and White. Every Cloyster was a shelter owned by a trainer who then used a water stone on it. There is no way there are enough Cloysters to die, let alone die and become a Ghastly. Use your heads. It is said that Kabutops 300 million years ago grew its legs to walk on land because that's what its prey did. So we know that similar to Darwinian evolution, Pokemon over millions of years changed too, starting in the water, then turning into birds, reptiles, insects, and eventually mammals. A very dominant trait, meaning one that gets passed down a lot, is those large scythes it has for hands. Large scythes. Scyther! Scyther could very well be a long-term descendant of Kabutops, though one's a crustacean and the other's an insect, so... shiny Kabutops is the same exact color as Scyther. That's enough to convince me. Nintendo makes Pokemon. They also make The Legend of Zelda. The Triforce was created by the goddesses Din, Nehru, and Faeror, and these three Pokemon, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, were created by the Pokemon god, Arceus. Each piece of the Triforce represents a different thing: wisdom, courage, and power. Each of these Pokemon also each represent a different thing: knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Possible reference? That's for you to decide. Paris is a grass and bug type Pokemon that has these two little mushrooms on its back. It is shown that they don't always have these, and they can even be removed. Paris also has pupils, but when it evolves into Parasect, its pupils are missing, its eyes are rolled back into its head, and its mushroom is now most of its body mass. This mushroom is a parasite on this insect. Parasect doesn't need its eyes because its mind has been taken over by the mushroom, just like Orpheocordyceps uniliteralis, a real-world fungus that infects and controls the minds of insects. Zoroark is a 5th generation Pokemon that can shapeshift, though instead of shapeshifting genetically and changing its stats like a Ditto, it shapeshifts through the power of illusion and keeps its stats. In Pokemon Black and White, we were introduced to a Zoroark that frequently got itself involved with the plot, especially when the plot involves a certain other character. N, the leader of Team Plasma, whose goal is to liberate Pokemon. N is the only human we know that can directly communicate with Pokemon, and looking at his and Zoroark's hairstyles, they too are similar. In Black 2 and White 2, you meet Zoroark and it shows you a flashback where we see N and no Zoroark. How would Zoroark know of this flashback unless it was there? Just like every other flashback story told in the game, they are all told by someone who is there. Zoroark leads you into N's castle, and when you enter it, Zoroark is nowhere to be seen, but N is standing right there. We know some Pokemon can talk and are very, very intelligent, so a Zoroark portraying itself as a human Pokemon trainer doesn't seem so far-fetched. Bird Pokemon can fly, besides those based on birds that can't fly, except for Doduo. Many have questioned how Doduo can possibly fly despite having no wings at all. Well, in the Pokemon Stadium games, Doduo seems to be able to fly by flailing its legs and heads. Doduo's Pokedex entry essentially states that the second head is part of a mutation to whatever kind of Pokemon this once was. With this additional head, Doduo learned to be an even more skilled runner by coordinating its brain power between the two heads. But without wings, brain and leg power can't really get you to fly. Actually, it can. You see this orange fuzz on Doduo's body? It's actually its feathers, and its tiny arms are concealed within them, much like the kiwi bird. By coordinating its heads, itty-bitty wings, legs, and puffing up its feathers, Doduo can leap up high and sort of air swim, kind of like Waluigi, except less weird. So with a consistent movement, Doduo can maintain a flight pattern and travel around the Pokemon world in the air. However, this awkward flying motion would make them easy catches for predators and Pokemon trainers, so they tend to stick to running. But at least now, all the naysayers can stop being confused when calling out Doduo to help them fly from town to town. They aren't the best at flying, but they'll get you there. Your egg is hatching. Congratulations on your new Kangaskhan! And your other new Kangaskhan baby inside the pouch of this newly hatched Kangaskhan. How do you explain this? Well, what if I told you there is only one Kangaskhan here? And it's the baby. Let's consider Mega Kangaskhan. To Mega Evolve a Pokemon, you need a specific ore, such as Charizite for Charizard. You need Kangaskhanite for Kangaskhan. And when Mega Evolving, only the baby grows and changes at all, because perhaps it's the only real one of the two. But if they are the same being, then how are they connected when the baby is out of the pouch? Well, easy, a mental link. But they aren't psychic type. Neither are Lucarios, and look what they can do. This would also explain why male Kangaskans have pouches with babies in them too. The parents are puppets, decoys, much like the body of Wobbuffet. Giovanni may not be all that bad. While still the head of a criminal organization, much of what was done by him in Red and Blue wasn't under ill intentions. First, let's look at Mewtwo. Some may say Mewtwo was cloned so that Giovanni could become more powerful and take control of the region. But Mewtwo could also have just been created as an experiment to study legendary Pokemon that are thought to be extinct. When Mewtwo escaped and started wreaking havoc everywhere, Giovanni knew he had to stop it. That's why he is trying to steal two particular items, the Sylph Scope and the Master Ball. The Sylph Scope helps you capture Ghost-type Pokemon. Ghost is super effective on Psychic, so they would be a great asset to have when fighting Mewtwo. And the Master Ball was the last resort to catch Mewtwo and stop his reign of terror. Giovanni really was protecting the world from devastation Somewhere on the other side, a being is doing all it can to press itself into our reality. As it begins to break through, all it can manage is a gaseous form, a gaseous face. As time goes on and it gains more power, it manages to bring its hands into our perception of existence. And as it uses the power of the dreams it eats, it claws away the barrier between worlds and pushes its full body into ours. Now its form is complete, a Gengar. But it's not quite done. When its true power is unleashed in its mega form, it has finally done it. Its hands and feet are now firmly planted into our reality. There is no going back. So here's a fan theory. The original Zelda game creators loved Hitler. Really, you can Google it and find article upon article about this, all because of the shape of one dungeon. Let's see, here we have a snake, here we have a lion. Oh, look, a swastika! Oh, except that this is complete baloney. This is a swastika. This is a mirrored swastika, also known as a manji, a Buddhist symbol of good fortune. That is the opposite of a swastika. Silly people. The original 3 evolutions, Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon, all cute. Well, once upon a time, the Brass Tower in Ekritik City burned down, and not everyone survived. This tower is where Ho-Oh occasionally roosted. Upon finding the dead evolutions, Ho-Oh revived them with its revival powers and gave them mass strength, making them legendarily powerful. They share the same colors, types, and even the exact abilities, Volt Absorb, Water Absorb, and Flash Fire, as the 3 legendary dogs, Raikou, Suicune, and Entei, all resurrected evolutions. Goat Simulator! This is the first so stupid it's fun game I've played in a long time. I actually attempted to start a gaming commentary show thing on my other channel. Psst, I recommend you start with this one. I think it's the best one. While playing this game, I noticed how ridiculous this goat's tongue is. But then I thought, there must be some sort of explanation behind it. Some way that it's super sticky, super strong, and super elastic. Well, buckle up. Preferably with your goat tongue seatbelts, because they are apparently the strongest material known to man. And get ready to ride your uncontrollable jetpack into the simulation of goat tongue enlightenment. So what animal comes to mind first when you think about a long, sticky, powerful tongue? Well, obviously the aardvark. But that's not the best example. Let's use a frog, or no! A chameleon. Not only do they have the super awesome superpower of color shifting, but they have one of the coolest tongues in the animal kingdom. And also one of the grossest looking. Chameleon tongues are over 5 times the length of the rest of its body. Its tongue is only attached to its body in the very back, and it has extra storage space in its bottom jaw, where it's stored, scrunched up, like these bungee jumping cables. And similar to bungee jumping cables, this goat can bungee jump with its tongue, off of a hang glider. It can hang glide and bungee jump at the same time! Take that, daredevils! But the really impressive part is just how far it can stretch. In all of my studying of this game, and I've studied it quite thoroughly, I have yet to find a limit to the length of this tongue. The goat just keeps pulling on whatever it's licked, until the pulling force is so great that whatever it was phases through what it was stuck on, which can only be possible if the pull being applied to the object is far greater than all the matter of the earth being applied onto each atom of the wall on a 1-to-1 scale, thus driving the chance of the atoms all quantum tunneling through the wall at precisely the very same Planck time, which is the shortest amount of time dimensionally possible, up from the millions of sextillions of zeros after the decimal 1% chance of happening, to the now merely tens of sextillions of zeros, and eventually after every Planck time passes with the force being applied, it eventually messes with its quantum decoherence and superposition, and quantum tunnels through the wall and continues its path towards the goat, at near the speed of light. Unless the goat is then applying backwards force to slow it down. Whoa! Who would have thought the topic of quantum mechanics would be brought up when discussing the tongue of a goat? But on to the next question. How does a tongue grab onto things? It's not grabbing stuff with its tongue like hands or like a giraffe tongue. There is no hand on its tongue, and there is no coiling of its tongue like a snake. So how about other natural methods? The way geckos and spiders walk on walls and ceilings isn't because their feet are sticky, but rather they have little hairs and ridges on their feet. Millions of them. Microscopic. These all cause friction with whatever they're walking on, meaning it's less work for physics to just keep them attached to whatever they want than it is to make them fall.
Well, whatever this goat is doing with its tongue, it has to be on the microscopic level, though I'm not so sure about the little hairs and ridges. Perhaps it's managed to lick up billions of Calibacter crescentuses. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. These little buggers secrete a sugary substance that's so sticky that just enough to cover a small coin, you could lift multiple cars. This goo has an adhesive force of nearly 5 tons per square inch. It is nature's strongest. So all of this leads me to the conclusion that this tongue is superpowered to the ultimate level. Forget Superman. Strap a cape to this tongue. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's both of those things, attached to the tongue of a goat. Who would win in a fight? The entire Marvel, DC, and Dragon Ball universes? Or this goat? I'd say the answer is pretty clear.
Rhydon may have been the first Pokemon to be designed by the Pokemon designers, but Clefable and Gengar are also very early Pokemon designs. And their bodies are eerily shaped similar, yet different enough. But now put a Clefable in direct light, and its two-dimensional shadow now has a much more Gengar-y shape. Gengar is, after all, the Shadow Pokemon. Perhaps it is the Shadow of none other than Clefable. A bright pink fairy thing to counter this dark, evil ghost. As we see in the Pokemon anime, Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar are all able to possess objects and move them around. Despite this, they are still able to be captured by a Pokeball. But what if instead of the Pokeball possessing them, they possess the Pokeball? Well, theoretically, now you have a ghost Pokemon permanently stuck possessing the Pokeball because of the Pokeballs capturing Pokemon power. And now, essentially, this is a living Pokeball. And those Haunter eyes look quite a lot like Voltorbs.
Vault Boy, this overly cheerful mascot of the Fallout franchise, looks a bit too optimistic considering the nuclear wasteland. Look at him give you that great white smile, that wink, and that A-OK thumbs up, telling you everything will be alright. Or will it? During the Cold War, many schools taught an old nuclear bomb safety trick. If you close one eye and hold your thumb out at arm's length, and your thumb covers the explosion, then you are at a safe distance. But if your thumb does not cover the explosion, find shelter. Unless, of course, your thumb really doesn't cover the explosion, then you have a few seconds to pray. If your thumb doesn't cover the explosion at all because it's been nuked off, then you are already dead. What are you even doing? Remember Sonic the Hedgehog 3? Here we meet Knuckles, who was tricked by Eggman into thinking that Sonic was the bad guy trying to steal the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald, the object Knuckles was sworn to protect. But he wasn't entirely tricked by him as we may assume, or he wasn't entirely tricked out of his own stupidity. He simply misinterpreted an ancient prophetic mural that depicts Sonic and a giant Eggman robot fighting. Now, without any prior knowledge to who these two are, how can you tell which is the bad guy? Is this giant Eggman bot using the power of the Master Emerald to stop the evil golden blue Sonic? Or is this Sonic trying to get the stolen Master Emerald back? Knuckles didn't know either way. This mural was made centuries before he was even born, but when Eggman came to him first, he assumed Eggman was the hero.
Kabutops is a slim and fast swimmer. It slices its prey with its sharp sickles and drinks the body fluids. It is thought that this Pokemon came onto land because its prey adapted to life on land. Kabutops is 100% a kick-butt hunter, or rather, slice-butt hunter. It evolved from Kabuto, which is thought to have inhabited beaches 300 million years ago. Now looking at Genesec's Pokemon entries, over 300 million years ago, it was feared as one of the strongest hunters. Team Plasma altered it and attached a cannon to its back. Wait a second. 300 million years? Change Kabutops' genes, mix it with some sort of insect, give it purple armor, attach a cannon.
Missing No was a game-breaking glitch Pokemon that appeared in the first games. Computer glitches and computer viruses are similar enough. Viruses can cause glitches. Deoxys is a biological virus that had its DNA mutated by a satellite, a computer. Both Deoxys and Missing No have very high attack and very low defense. Deoxys did exist in Ruby and Sapphire in data form, but it wasn't until the remake of the original games, the ones with Missing No, Fire Red and Leaf Green, that there was an event to capture Deoxys. Deoxys is Game Freak's attempt to make Missing No real. Remember these, not Double Dragon, NES cartridges. Remember constantly fumbling with them and blowing into them in an attempt to get them to work?
Noggin.
made sense when we were kids. Blowing into them got all the dust out, because there was obviously spoonfuls of dust in them.
But did blowing in these actually do anything? The way these cartridge games worked is pretty much the same as the graphics card in your PC, except instead of graphics, it's the full game.
Each of these metal pins corresponds with another pin on the inside of the console. If they were shifted a bit, or if there was a buildup of residue, they simply wouldn't connect.
NES cartridges use copper pins. Copper, when exposed to air long enough, tends to develop patina, a film that could block the connection.
After about 15 years of no use or cleaning. But that didn't stop us from constantly blowing into these and using cleaning solvents.
All this cleaning actually, over time, breaks down the connecty bits and promotes the development of patina.
Which breaks down that connection.
But it's not entirely your fault. It's also the console designer's fault. Many cartridge-based consoles, like the NES, used nickel pins on springs that would push and slide the cartridge pins into place, bending the nickel pins back. On top of this, the springs push the nickel pins into the cartridge for a better connection.
But over time, those springs would weaken and may not press against the cart fully. So all of these factors of aging and use were the real culprits behind these NES cartridges not working. It had nothing to do with all the dust inside. So we blew into them. Again and again and again.
And if you had saliva at your breath, it would only help, because as we all know, water helps electricity.
But what does Nintendo know? I mean, every time I blew it and it worked. You gotta blow on it 4-7 times. As long as you keep trying it and keep putting it back in, it works.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but you were doing nothing good. It was merely the taking it out and putting it back in that was doing all the work. Eventually, you just happened to get that good connection. Blowing into them with a mouthful of saliva makes the connections rust even faster. We only thought it worked as a placebo. We heard about it working, we tried it, and it eventually worked too. When really, it was just that compared to previous cartridge systems, the NES wasn't built the best, and had plenty of normal connection issues, even when dust-free.
A man named Frank Petrello did a month-long study. He found 2 NES cartridges with nearly identical quality connectors. He then decided to blow into one, and not the other. After a month, the blown one was lighter because of patina. And that white gunk? That's mold, from the moisture in his breath. Ew!
So in the short run, blowing into it might have helped it a tad, but in the long run, you were throwing it away. That's gonna die. It didn't even solve the real problem. The real problem was the connection, and here's a secret. If you push the cart down in the NES, then stick another cart on top of it and press that down just a little bit more, it will push the cart into the connector pins. This method is much better than blowing into them, and much, much better than licking them. Stay awesome.
I have become the very best, like no one ever was.
Oh, Blue, imagine you being here. Are you the new champion? Sweet, let's battle.
Noggin.
Has anyone ever wondered about just how Blue became the champion of Kanto in the first place? The easy answer is that he was a tough trainer who showed no mercy and powered through. But here's another theory. Blue actually joined Team Rocket and used them to help cheat his way into becoming the Kanto champion. Let's dive into this at the beginning. Before your first battle with Blue, Blue lets you choose your Pokemon first, so he can cheat and take the better Pokemon, the Pokemon with the type advantage, trying to ensure his victory in future battles with you. While all rivals do this, Blue seems a little more methodical in his choice. He's choosing the better one for the sole purpose of beating you. Silver just stole a Pokemon from the lab. It just so happened to be the better type. In Gen 3, you pick your Pokemon in an emergency situation. Your rival has no idea which one you choose. Barry picked a Pokemon out of desperation. Hugh raised his from an egg. Serena got the last pick of the 3, and just happened to get the one with the type advantage. Blue is the only rival who simply takes his starter Pokemon because he saw which one you picked first, and simply claims it looks a lot tougher than yours. And with that type advantage, in a way, it is. But whoa. While this may prove Blue is more malicious than other rivals, it doesn't say a thing about Team Rocket. So let's move on to later in the game. To the next mandatory rival battle.
Here we see Blue coming back from Nugget Bridge. On that bridge is the Nugget Challenge, where you have to battle 5 trainers. Blue is strong enough to destroy them all, but at the end of the bridge is a Rocket Grunt who gives you a gold nugget, and offers you a spot in Team Rocket. You, of course, decline. But what did Blue do? Blue could have accepted the gold nugget, accepted the place in Team Rocket, and for his first task, went and abused Bill. Blue mentions that you should talk to Bill, because Bill showed him his rare Pokemon. But when you meet Bill, he is a Pokemon! And this is only a little while after Blue left Bill. Bill claims that he was in an accident, but maybe, just maybe, Blue set up said accident.
No! This is bad sound design!
And turned Bill into a Pokemon, then scanned, or even worse, stole his Pokemon to add to his Pokedex. Bill must have trusted Blue to help with this experiment, which is why he doesn't call out Blue for accidentally transforming him into something Red would catch, or at the very least, ignore. Still, there is tons of assumption in that. It may purely be a coincidence. We have a link, but that's it. So let's establish Blue's malicious character a little more. How about the battle on SS Anne? When you meet Blue here, he is coming out of the captain's quarters, where he claims he was looking for a cut master, but instead just found a seasick old man, then leaves. When Red meets the captain, he's really sick to his stomach, and Red has to cure him. Now, Blue could have just been ignorant about the captain, but what if instead he was trying to sabotage Red? What if he wants Red to never learn Cut? Because it's a vital part in Pokemon journeys. Blue was able to defeat Lieutenant Surge before Red, so he must have acquired Cut somehow. Perhaps he learned Cut from the captain, but then snuck into his food a small dosage of poison to upset his stomach and make him useless to Red. Why, that cheating, lying, stealing son of a baggin'! Moving on to Pokemon Tower, the most popular theory as to why Blue is here is because his Raticate died in the last battle you had with him. While that theory may still ring true, there is another reason for Blue to be here. To replace it. The top floors house 2 important features. One is Team Rocket, once again establishing a possible connection between them and Blue. The second is the spirit of a Marowak. While we see the Marowak spirit as a guard you needed the Sylph Scope for, does anyone wonder why the Marowak is so close to Team Rocket? Well, here's the kicker for us. After you defeat Blue, he mentions that he just caught a Cubone. Cubone are especially rare in Pokemon Tower, and it's implied that the Marowak spirit at the top is the mother of the Cubone that reside in Pokemon Tower. Now this is where we draw the line with all of these coincidences. We have enough of a right to proclaim that Blue and Team Rocket killed the Marowak because it was interfering, and as a reward for his efforts, Blue was allowed to capture the baby Cubone and add it to his collection of Pokemon. And now we head toward the biggest point of all, Silphco. You're a 10-year-old boy invading a hostile crime organization's operation. Every single Team Rocket member there is out for your head because you're intruding on their mission. But near the end, you once again meet Blue, who's just randomly there, and challenges you to a horrendously timed battle.
Hey Blue, man, I just got a little question. Just a little question. Just a tiny little question that I thought you could answer. How did you get in here?
Seriously, either Team Rocket is so incompetent that not one, but 2 10-year-old kids can walk into their mission, or, if you look at this room for a second, Blue would need a key card from a Team Rocket member. Maybe these so-called coincidences actually mean something. Let's look at the battle closely too. After Blue is defeated, he says that you are ready for Boss Rocket, as if he knows who the head of Team Rocket is. He claims the reason is that he just followed Red into Silphco, but how would he get into this room before you if he was behind you? We would have seen him at some point, so it is safe to say he was in here waiting to have another battle while he guards Giovanni from Red. And that's not all. Who comes to Red after Blue leaves?
a previously trapped scientist who gives Red a Lapras. Good thing that scientist didn't show Blue the Lapras, or else Blue would have to snatch it up just like he did Cubone. Before we move on to the next fight, let's focus our attention on a theme that seems to be occurring. Each mission that Team Rocket seems to be giving Blue increases in importance each time. He starts off with just tricking Bill, setting up a small accident. Then he poisons the captain of a huge ship, then actively kills a Pokemon so he can capture its baby. And now, holding a human being hostage and guarding Giovanni. There is no way for your ordinary new recruit of Team Rocket to advance through the ranks this quickly. These positions of holding hostages and guarding Giovanni are only given to those who have proved themselves. What I'm saying is, Blue is essentially Sevipering his way through Team Rocket's ranks. Blue is rocketing his way through the ranks of this organization. He started from the bottom and climbed his way to becoming Giovanni's bodyguard. Pretty quickly. But why? Well, the answer is simple. To win the Pokemon League. Blue uses the Pokemon stolen by Team Rocket to fuel his Pokedex and keeps the best for himself to beat the gyms. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that the only Pokemon he earned is his starter, his Pidgey, and his Rattata. All very easy Pokemon to get, I might add. Then he begins working with Team Rocket. He gets an Abra as a reward for abusing Bill, and then starts collecting stolen Pokemon to help him defeat the gym leaders. Execute barrages through Lieutenant Surge. Growlithe burns Erica. Kadabra out-psychics the poisonous Koga, and will eventually evolve into Alakazam and out-psychic Sabrina. Then, he replaces his Raticate in favor of a Gyarados that washes out Blaine, and that just leaves Giovanni, the final gym leader and leader of Team Rocket, who just gives him a badge as a reward for his loyalty. Professor Oak was right. Blue did forget about his trust and love. He stole and collected rewards as he made his way to the top. What's that? You're still not convinced? Well, here are two more facts. After Red beats Giovanni for the final time, he disbands from Team Rocket and goes on a new Pokemon journey. Then when you reach Blue as the champion and battle with him, who is added to his team? A Rhydon. One of Giovanni's signature Pokemon is Rhyhorn. This is a possible gift from Giovanni to Blue for his loyalty. It then evolves into Rhydon and conquers the Elite Four with its high stats. And finally, after Team Rocket loses Giovanni and Blue is bested by Red for the last time, he takes up control as the head of the Viridian City Gym, or otherwise known as the head of Team Rocket. Which bites him in the butt because Team Rocket has no competence in this game. Maybe because it's manned by a 10-year-old kid. With all these strange coincidences in rapid succession, you can see that Blue used Team Rocket, the main villains of Pokemon, to become the champion. Blue's story is one of sabotage and villainy against Red's of hard work and peace. In the end, the hard work paid off. And if you still don't buy it, then look at it this way. See Blue as a parallel to Team Rocket. They both use Pokemon to gain fame and fortune. They both use villainous tactics to get ahead of others, and while they may both reach their goal for a short period of time, they are absolutely devastated by a 10-year-old kid.
Here's something to think about. What are some of the most iconic Mario power-ups? Well, the first to come to mind should be the Mushroom, the 1-Up Mushroom, and the Fireflower, and with good reason. The Mushrooms let you get hit a few more times, and the Fireflower offers you even more protection by letting you take out enemies from afar. Mario's fireballs can do all sorts of things, like bounce and even be shot underwater. What? So how does this work? At its basics, we all know fire plus water equals no fire. It's super effective. Getting more into it, fire needs three things to happen. A fuel source to burn, such as wood or a Goomba. and it needs heat and oxygen. But wait, if a fire needs oxygen, then why does water put it out? Chemically speaking, water is H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom. Well, fire can't use those oxygen atoms in the water molecule because they are too tightly bound to the hydrogen atoms. On top of this, water is a very good heat conductor. It absorbs the heat and takes it away from the fire. But if this is the case, then how does Mario do it? Well, in order to find that answer, we need to stretch our definition of a fireball. You can't, per se, get actual flames underwater, but you can have something ignited and have it burn brightly in a flame-like way, in what appears to be a bright fireball. With this definition, we could say that Mario is actually throwing an alkali metal, potassium, rubidium, cesium, etc. These metals actually ignite when they touch water, so they could fit into this new definition of the fireball. But the problem with this now is that they would ignite before he had the chance to throw it, or even before he had the chance to take it out of his pocket. Also, the reaction is less a fireball burning and more akin to a explosion. So what could possibly work in the vast world of science? There are so many chemical combinations to consider. You'd have to be a rocket scientist to figure it all out. Actually, that is exactly right! Rocket fuel! Now when I say rocket fuel, odds are most of you think of it in its liquid form, similar to gasoline. You have a tank of the fuel, and you have an oxidizer, something that adds oxygen to it. Then you add the heat. And boom! Fire, force, propulsion. But did you know that there is actually a solid form of rocket fuel too, that is pre-oxidized? That's right, solid rocket fuel is the fuel and the oxygen that the fire needs. So all that's left is heat. That heat can come in the form of a spark, from pressure, from friction. Once that solid fuel reaches its ignition point, it catches fire. And since it provides its own oxygen, it can work underwater too. And that it does, as we see here. A chunk of solid rocket fuel submerged in water with its temperature slowly rising to its ignition point. Then, once it reaches that temperature, an underwater fireball. Now, while Mario's fireballs aren't as fast and sporadic, I believe it is safe to say that his fireballs are in some form or another a slower burning solid rocket fuel substance that he then uses his normal Fireflower power to heat up, then throw. But now, what is this Fireflower power? How do Fireflowers work? Subscribe and stay tuned and you'll soon figure it out.
This is the hour to cower, Bowser, 'cause Mario's got the power of a Fireflower.
The Fireflower is one of the most iconic Mario power-ups, along with the mushroom, of course. It gives Mario a fresh recoloring and gives him the ability to throw bouncing fireballs. But how can a plant do such a thing? Isn't fire super effective against grass? Wouldn't a plant creating fire be dangerous and counterintuitive? That's like a fish creating electricity. Okay, that's not the best example. In living things, it's almost exclusively reserved for mammals and birds. And it takes a lot of constant consumption of calories to do that. So how could a plant do something like this?
What do you even do? You're just a plant?
Or better yet, why would it need to? Flowering plants need sunlight to live in the first place. They turn it into energy via photosynthesis and grow. They have all the warmth they need from the sun. Or do they? Perhaps being able to produce heat can help them evade potential predators. This is what the various pepper plants did. While peppers don't exactly create heat in the sense of a higher temperature, they do create what our brains perceive as heat. The chemical found in the peppers that does this is called capsaicin. The higher up the Scoville scale the pepper is, the spicier and hotter it is, thus the more capsaicin there is. When capsaicin comes into contact with the living tissue of mammals specifically, it becomes an irritant that we perceive as heat. And rightly so. An excess of capsaicin can cause chemical burns. That's why we put it in pepper spray. Pepper plants use capsaicin as a line of defense against mammals. When birds eat pepper seeds, they swallow them whole, and once their bodies are finished with them, they get defecated elsewhere, which helps spread the plant's seeds. But now if a mammal is eating the pepper, mammals have molars, which crush the seeds down, destroying it and preventing the spread of the plant. Humans are one of the only mammals that enjoys the consumption of peppers. And even then, not all humans do.
Okay! Alright!
So, while not the same type of heat as, say, fire, we can use this as one example of a plant that uses chemicals and perceived heat as a line of defense. The next step is finding a living thing that generates its own temperate heat. Anything that is thermogenic generates its heat in its mitochondria by adding a few steps to its cellular respiration. They use alternative oxidases and uncoupling proteins. In case you didn't understand any of that, I pretty much just described part of your metabolism, which, put simply, takes the food you eat, breaks it down, and delivers its energy, calories, minerals, fat, and such to all the parts of your body that need it. This processing and transferring that's being done in birds and mammals creates heat as a byproduct. That's why lots of people who have extra fast metabolisms, those incredibly lucky people who can eat as much of whatever they want and not get fat, do have the side effect of heat flashes and being more sensitive to warm temperatures and having their body heat trapped in by warm clothing. This is also why those metabolism-boosting weight loss pills list heat flashes as one of the side effects. But even if you have the world's fastest metabolism, and you get a lethally high fever, you won't be throwing fire from your fists anytime soon. Not only because you're nowhere near the right temperature to do that, but also because you're dead. But if this type of metabolism is only found in mammals and birds, how can we apply this to a fireflower? Well, simple. The Fireflower is a bird! Think about it, it has eyes after all, and these leaves could very well be wings, or they are just leaves, and come to think of it, everything in the Mushroom Kingdom has eyes. Flowers, stars, even the hills have eyes. So back to plants. Most plants do not have the same type of metabolism that mammals and birds do, because, as I said, they don't need it. But with my green thumb pressed firmly against the spacebar, I did a little research and found that there are in fact a number of plants that do create their own heat. And they do this through their own process of metabolic thermogenesis. And better yet, most of them are flowering plants. But why would a plant need to heat itself up? Well, there are two reasons actually. First, let's look at the eastern skunk cabbage. It hails from North America between Minnesota and Quebec. In late winter, as the snow begins to melt, the eastern skunk cabbage begins to generate heat around itself to melt the snow around it first. This gives it a boost, a head start in its blooming. Another thermogenic plant is the dead horse arum lily, which lives on the islands in the Mediterranean Sea. They use heat for pollination purposes. The heat warms the air around them, causing it to rise and carry the scent of the flower with it. This warmth and scent attracts insects to come into the flower, they get bits of the flower's pollen on them, and they then spread it to other flowers for reproduction. Flowers are into some pretty kinky stuff. And by the way, notice the names of these thermogenic plants. The eastern skunk cabbage, the dead horse arum lily, there's also the carrion flower, also known as the corpse flower. Nearly every plant that is able to generate its own heat also has a very powerful stench, which is described as similar to that of a rotting corpse out in the sun. No wonder it attracts flies. And mamma mia, Mario must stink when he's using the Fireflower power, because I am pretty sure that it is safe to say that the Fireflower has a similar method of heat production to these plants, but to a higher degree, and because of this, it is entirely possible that this already grandiose stench also raises proportionally to the heat of the flower. And here I thought Mario would just smell bad from being an overweight, garlicky, pasta-munching Italian plumber. But it takes a lot more than heat alone for Mario to go all Colonel Mustang on some Koopa Keister. Fire needs heat, oxygen, and a fuel source to burn. Luckily, we answered that in the last episode. Mario throws solid rocket fuel that he heats up with the Fireflower to the point of ignition, and that was just to throw it underwater. Above water, it could really be almost anything that is easily able to burst into flame. And the heat used to do this may not even be from the Fireflower heat alone. Mario could be causing friction to occur with the rough material of his gloves, taking the already hot Fireflower infused cloth and heating up whatever he holds even more so. So remember, the next time you light Lightaku, set Fawful on fire, or burn a buzzy beetle, that your ability to do so is thanks to a hot, kinky plant that smells like the rotting corpses of a million skunks. Mario is really taking one for the team. How do you get that smell out of your mustache? Ugh.
Falcon Punched! Falcon Punched! Falcon Punched! Falcon Punched! Falcon Punched! Falcon Punched!
What if this were real? Captain Falcon, everyone's favorite spandex-wearing, fiery-fisted hover race car driver, seems to be more well known for his appearance in Smash Bros. Than his actual racing games. And we all know why.
Its memorable lines like,
Yes! Come on! Show me your moves! Falcon Kick!
and the favorite of them all,
Falcon Punch!
complete with fiery falcon sounds and all. But now the question arises, what would happen if in real life you were Falcon punched in the face? First, let's look at the other factor here. You. Specifically, your face. During bicycle helmet testing, scientists who later published the Journal of Neurosurgery, Pediatrics, tested hundreds of human skulls to determine what it would take to completely crush a human skull. And not just the skulls either, oh no. They've filled them up with artificial filling to simulate the proper weight and density of the brain, so this test is very accurate. They found that the maximum load any skull could handle from any angle under the best conditions is only about 520 pounds of force, before being completely crushed flat. This is why you should wear a helmet. Now, looking at the in-game effects of a Falcon Punch, you wouldn't assume it to be that bad. But by its very nature, the Falcon Punch is impossible. It's a punch that sets itself on fire without any more than the drag of the air and its speed forward. But at the speeds we see it clearly going, that's just not possible. So what would have to be done to actually make the Falcon Punch possible? Well, let's make this easy on ourselves and make a few assumptions. First, that the air temperature is normal, room temperature. Next, that Captain Falcon is about an average-sized muscular male, and that this glove is made of leather, though really the material doesn't matter too much. All it really changes is the ignition point, that being the temperature at which a material will completely burst into flames. And also to make things easier, we'll be calculating this with just the fist, not the whole body behind it. And also, we'll assume the fist is more cube-shaped. So taking into account all of this, and seeing that according to average man body proportions, this punch from here to here would be about 250 centimeters long, and the fist would weigh about 1.5 kilograms. Now, using this calculation I barely understand, among a few others, me and some people who know way more about the stuff than I do, determined that this fist would need to be moving at 4,067 meters per second, or about Mach 12. You heard me right. In order to make your fist catch fire while traveling a distance of 250 centimeters, you would need to push it faster than the speed of sound, a dozen times over. Your fist would be fully cocked back to fully thrusted out in 0.000615 of a second. That's 1/1626 of a second. And since this punch starts without moving at all, way back there, it gives itself an acceleration of about 661,300.81. And with the mass of the fist and its acceleration, we can find the number of newtons this punch would push. And that number is an astonishing 991,951.22 newtons. Yeah, that number looks big, but if you don't know what a newton is, then it means nothing to you. Converting that number into pounds force, which is as it sounds, the amount of force that would be applied by having a number of pounds of things on you, we find that this punch deals a pounds force total of 222,999.51. At this point, do I even need to say it? Your face is not only in the back of your skull, but it is also probably so far detached from the rest of your body, we'll need to send a search team to find it. That is, of course, if it didn't completely explode. But we're not done here yet, no, certainly not, because there is one forgotten detail. This is just what would happen if you were punched by a fist that ignited by the time it hit you. The graph of this fist's temperature looks like this. As it moves at these supersonic speeds, it heats up until finally, near the end of the punch, it becomes engulfed in flame at 212 degrees C. But looking at Captain Falcon's fist during the Falcon Punch, it doesn't ignite near the end of the punch, but near the beginning. It barely moves at all before being lit. So we need to make this graph look like this one. It needs to spike to its ignition point almost immediately. For the fist to be set ablaze by the beginning of the push forward, it would have to be going significantly faster, like at speeds of 7,683 meters per second, or Mach 23. Finding the new pounds force with this new speed, we get an astounding force of 7 1,971,725.12. This means that this fist can withstand and deal out forces more than 26 times stronger than Earth's strongest car crushers. You would need to stack 58,187 average adults on top of each other to apply that same force to whatever they're standing on, or about 44,780 average American adults. The Falcon Punch applies 1.7 million more pounds of force than the Saturn V rocket, so being Falcon Punched puts more pressure on your face than if this rocket were to be set on it. And most frighteningly, this punch is nearly as powerful as the FOAB, the father of all bombs. The father of all bombs is the nickname for a Russian aviation thermobaric bomb of increased power. It is thought to be the world's most powerful non-nuclear bomb, and its explosive power is said to be as strong as anywhere from 34 to 44 tons of TNT. But now, in the context of this punch, take all of that explosive power, all of those shockwaves, those sonic booms, that sudden rise in temperature that goes in all directions, and apply all of it into one direction. Your face. Thanks for watching. Keep using your heads. Alright, time to explain a small detail. For the past few months, all over the internet I've been seeing people upset that Falco's Final Smash still makes no sense. For me, it was the other way around. It took me some time until I figured out why it doesn't make sense to some people. Allow me to explain. What gets confusing is that Falco, who's been fighting on the ground all this time, then gets a Smash Ball and proceeds to say,
Personally, I prefer the air.
And then gets into a tank. A Landmaster, which is the huge tank. Why would he say he prefers the air, and then get into a massive land vehicle? Though it does have those rockets. This is what confuses people, and also back in Brawl led to the rumor that Falco's Final Smash was originally going to be an R-Wing, but later in development was changed to mimic Fox's.
Landmaster!
But that was never the intention. Otherwise, they would have either changed Falco's Final Smash or changed the line he says when he activates it. No, actually it does make sense. Falco has always been kind of sarcastic and cocky.
Hey Einstein, I'm on your side!
So when he says,
Personally, I prefer the air.
He's actually saying that while he does in fact prefer the air, he is willing to instead get into a Landmaster and beat you that way. Or perhaps a Landmaster is the only option to him at the time. So, personally, he prefers the air. But, guess he'll just live with that. Here's a theory. The Super Smash Bros. Franchise is about living with autism.
Noggin.
I had to read so many journals from all kinds of studies and universities to get and double-check all this information, so I hope it's worth it. Let me get this out of the way now. I am not talking about the fan base in any way. I know that on certain parts of the internet, calling certain types of Smash Bros. Fans autistic is commonplace, but here we are talking strictly about the game franchise itself. The original, Melee, Brawl, 4 Wii U, and 4 3DS. 4 Wii U. Smash 4. See? That title is actually pretty genius. Now, before I trigger any of you by merely mentioning autism, let me just say that there are many misconceptions about autism and its symptoms, and as such I will only be using information from scholarly sources, from people who study autism and other mental disorders for a living. And that is misconception number 1. Autism is not a mental disorder. It's a neurological one, meaning, instead of being caused by chemical imbalances in the brain, having autism means you have physical abnormalities in your brain structure, and have since birth. But what causes this change in structure is still being looked into. What scientists do know is that it is not caused by how the child is raised, vaccines, and most certainly not cow's milk. Oh my word, PETA. Having autism also doesn't mean you will become a savant of some kind. You won't necessarily memorize the dictionary or think out mathematical equations faster than a calculator. Only about 10% of people on the autism spectrum have this ability in one form or another. I personally know someone who has memorized, word for word, every episode of Pokemon and Star Trek. Not as useful as memorizing the dictionary, but pretty cool nonetheless. On the other end, another misconception is that all autistic people are socially and empathetically inept. This too only affects a portion of people with autism. In fact, there are plethoras upon plethoras of symptoms that autistic people can show, from physically not being able to comprehend empathy to being over-empathetical, from being able to memorize multiple languages to physically not being able to understand sarcasm or idioms. But no single person with autism can have all of the autistic symptoms, though some have more than others, and can have them to various degrees. This is one reason why autism is diagnosed in a spectrum, consisting of 5 disorders: autism, Asperger's syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, Rett syndrome, and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or other. Now with all this in mind, let's move on. So it is somewhat common knowledge that Smash Bros. Is completely a non-canon game.
Say what?
In fact, looking at the opening of the original Smash Bros., it shows that the fighters are toys being played with on a desk in a child's bedroom, and things like tissue boxes and pencils are being used as stage platforms. All of this is being controlled by the hand, which, while it is disembodied, can be used as a symbol for the child setting up playtime. And the final boss, Master Hand, is merely the child pretending his hand is a monster. That's right, all of Smash Bros. Takes place in the imagination of a child living with autism. And yes, I will refer to this child as a male because statistically speaking, 4 out of every 5 people with autism are male. Now, some may refute this theory immediately by claiming that children with autism have no imagination and thus could not think up these magical fight scenes. But no, that is another misconception. Like the other misconceptions I mentioned, it does hold some ground to a point. Physically not being able to imagine fight scenes as vivid and detailed as the scenes we see in Smash Bros. Is one of the many symptoms some autistic children have to deal with. But not all of those with autism deal with it. Each person with autism has their own set of symptoms pulled from a pool. A very common symptom that leads some to believe they lack imagination is that they prefer living in routine. They like sticking to a schedule and not differing from it too much, sometimes to an extreme, like we see in the movie Rain Man. And sticking to such routines means you don't want to be creative with your time, and not being creative means you lack imagination, which is true to an extent, but many studies have shown that even those with the autistic symptom of needing to stick to routines can be creative and have vivid imaginations if you put the time to use such creativity into their schedule. Set aside an hour a day to paint something, and they will paint something creatively, with their imagination. And some people with autism can actually imagine up stories and images with even more detail than most of the neurotypical population. And that is yet another symptom that can be pulled from the pool, albeit not as common of one. So now that that rebuttal has been launched off the stage, let's move on to how all that information is actually helpful. One detail that was noticed by multiple scientists studying this symptom of autism is that while many of them do in fact have imaginations, not all of them work the same way, due to the brain being wired differently. Explaining with an example, let's try and imagine Samus in her suit, but with her arms outside the suit, and doing a Kamehameha. Most of you are probably able to imagine that with relative ease, but some of those with autism are not able to imagine such things, because it doesn't make sense.
Samus isn't from Dragon Ball Z, she cannot Kamehameha!
While they can imagine characters meeting each other in their respective worlds, some of them have difficulty imagining up new things. and even more difficulty imagining these characters doing things outside of their character. With Smash Bros., it helps with the idea of simply bringing in outside characters together to fight with their own moves from their own games, rather than the idea of him coming up with his own characters and having them duke it out. And even with the Master Hand, rather than imagining up a new villain to fight, he simply uses his own hand. His hand that also sets up the fights with the toys to begin with. The toys that his parents have bought for him. His parents are introducing him to video games. His first Nintendo, his first Game Boy, he loves it so much. And as he learns more about it, he wants more toys of more characters. He starts off with the classics, Mario, Link, Samus, Pikachu, and eventually gets his hands on some of the not-so-well-known games, Earthbound, F-Zero, and he finally catches a Jigglypuff in Pokemon. And then his dad finally starts playing Mario with him, which introduces him to Luigi. He slowly begins to develop an obsession of the medium, an obsession with Nintendo. Nintendo becomes part of his routine. Obsessions, like routines, are part of another common symptom of autism, and these obsessions can range from something as specific as just Pikachu, or as wide as Nintendo as a whole. When the obsessions are found in things like wordplay or maps, you often get those with autism to a savant ability, such as having every road in California memorized. Though most of those with the autistic symptom of being obsessed of something don't wind up obsessing over such things. Instead, more commonly, and somewhat stereotypically, it falls into things such as Minecraft, My Little Pony, and of course, Nintendo. Though this does make sense, as most of the time these obsessions develop in childhood, especially early childhood, and they rarely get grown out of. An autistic child that finds themselves obsessed with Nintendo will probably be with them for life. So now going forward in history, Super Smash Bros. Melee, our autistic friend has now been introduced to even more Nintendo characters, and with his Nintendo obsession, he's gone back and played some older Nintendo games. He's even gone out and learned Japanese to be able to play some of the Japan-exclusive Nintendo games, specifically Fire Emblem. And of course, he has added to his collection of toys to play with, though instead of plush toys, he gets action figures and trophies. As we see in the opening of Melee, Mario pops in as a statue before what we can assume as
the power of imagination
brings him to life to fight Link. Melee also introduces another character, one that does not originate from any other Nintendo franchise. Crazy Hand. The primary difference between Master Hand and Crazy Hand is that Crazy Hand is, well, crazy, always moving and twitching about, almost as if it doesn't have any control over itself. Now let's talk about some other disorders on the autism spectrum. Asperger's. Like autism, Asperger's has a pool of symptoms that each individual pulls a few from. One of these is issues with motor skills, which in itself is also a spectrum. It can range from simply not being capable of having decent handwriting, all the way to frequent twitches, which occasionally are very hard. Also, people with this often never feel comfortable in their own skin, and feel the need to keep moving at least one part of their body. In this case, our autistic friend in Smash Bros. Does so with his left hand, and due to its more crazy nature, he himself refers to it as his crazy hand, opposed to his dominant right hand, the Master Hand. But wouldn't this mean that he has Asperger's? While still in the autism spectrum, Asperger's isn't the same as your traditional autism, right? Well, no. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is pretty much the Bible of mental and neurological disorders, no longer considers Asperger's to be separate from autism spectrum disorder. They are far too similar for there to be a need of separating them. So our friend here still has autism, and happens to have some of the symptoms previously reserved only for Asperger's. And now we move on to Brawl. We can now assume that the boy has grown into at least a middle schooler. He is starting to make some friends. Some that didn't have the same early childhood he had. Instead of pure Nintendo kids, we have a kid who played Metal Gear instead of Mario, and another friend who didn't even own a Nintendo system. He had Sega systems, and grew up with Sonic. Hanging out with these new friends, they introduce him to Snake and Sonic, two great franchises that he too finds a fondness of, and adds their merchandise to his collection. Are his parents loaded or what?
Being introduced to whole new franchises outside of Nintendo, however, causes him to drift away. Just a little bit, though. This causes him to forget some of the less important Nintendo characters, such as Roy, Pichu, Dr. Mario. And there are so many legendary Pokemon by now that they don't really matter anymore, so he forgets about Mewtwo, favoring Lucario now instead. The furry. Which, as not offensive as I can say this, does also help this theory. Now, I'm not saying all, but that should be very clear by now. As varied as the effects of autism on an individual can be, it should be clear by now that I am not talking in absolutes in any way, shape, or form. But a good number of furries are autistic, even if only lightly. Scientists are still unsure of the exacts when it comes to how autism affects sexuality, but they do know that it has an effect. Effects such as starting to feel sexual feelings far below the normal age, or feeling them far later than the normal age. Some even never at all. Where things really do get interesting is that those with autism are much more likely to develop fetishes, which include, but are not at all limited to, a furry fetish. And I'll be giving furries their own video at some point in the future. So in this case, it would make sense to favor Lucario, who is easily the furriest Pokemon of them all. And while we're on the topic of sexuality, this could also explain some key points about the characters that he gets the merchandise of. In the original Smash Bros., you have Samus, though she is just in her suit. And in Melee, you have Peach and Zelda. Nothing much. In Brawl, you get Samus in a skin-tight bodysuit, but now in Smash 4, there are tons and tons of more women. Even Wii Fit Trainer. What? It's the yoga pants, isn't it? And the skin-tight Zero Suit Samus is now bustier and in heels, plus has some, revealing variants. But that's not all. Shulk here also has a scantily clad option, and various butts and crotch bulges are much more prominent in Smash 4 as well. And this too benefits the theory. A study by INSAR found that compared to a large control group of those without autism, those with autism are much more likely to be sexually diverse, meaning our friend here is much more likely to be homosexual, bisexual, or asexual. And considering all the sexy things imagined by him in Smash 4 on both genders, it is safe to say he is a bit bisexual. Our little pal is growing up and getting more and more in tune with his sexuality. Now, getting into the Subspace Emissary, the plot, the story mode of Brawl, really introduces some deep and troubling elements to this whole thing. First of all of the characters are mute. They never speak. This too is a higher level symptom of autism, as autism is primarily an issue with social behavior. And as revealed near the end, we see Master Hand being controlled by Taboo, like a puppet. And Master Hand, who is the kid, remember, doesn't like it. But for now, while being puppeted, has no choice but to conform. This Taboo is bullying personified. And I don't just mean the school bullies picking on the autistic kid for having social problems and being a Nintendo fanboy. I also mean some of the people who are trying to help, who try to help by trying to conform him into society's rules and expectations. I collaborated with my fiancée on the research for this video, as she understands both childhood education and autism better than I do. While we were discussing our research and sharing links, I brought up autismspeaks.org, and she immediately said, "Don't go there. They don't really help or know what they're talking about." Curious about this, I did some research and found out why. As it turns out, Autism Speaks, which is a charity organization meant to help autistic people live their lives, does so under the ideology that people who have autism are completely wrong and messed up. They treat autism as an epidemic, and even say so in their speeches, which many critics say are downright offensive, and as trying to make those with autism sound inhuman. This is exactly the kind of bullying Taboo is doing. Autism Speaks and similar organizations, which start out with good intentions, try to help by puppeting autistic people into quote-unquote normal people, all without considering what actual autistic people say or think, because, being autistic, they have no idea that they have things wrong with them. They see autism as something drastically wrong, as having no place in society. They see autism as something taboo. Oh, the chills. And it doesn't stop there. In Smash 4, when Master Hand gets defeated while Crazy Hand is still up, Master Core appears from the hand, starting out as a giant of darkness, followed by a shadowy beast, then a mass of shadowy blades, and then a large, dark, shadowy mess of yourself. Let me tell you about just one more common symptom of autism: amplified emotions. Anything that can cause someone to be upset would likely cause someone with autism to become even more upset. Keep that in mind as we talk about this final point. The first form of this final boss is Master Giant, perhaps an extension of Taboo, as they are both large and of humanoid form. This is even more bullying personified from those who are bigger and better than him. Parents, teachers, bosses, people in control, and that can rock his world. The next form is a ambiguous wolf-scorpion hybrid with a bear trap for a mouth. This mix-up of a monster doesn't really fit into any one animal category, and it's pretty terrifying, and that is exactly what it symbolizes. This is the boy's fear of not fitting in, being different and strange. Many people, even those without autism, feel this from time to time, so now amplify that feeling. As the kid grows up and hits puberty, his hormones start pulsating through his body, causing emotions to flourish on their own. He is still being pressured to fit in. His fear of his crazy hand taking over and dominating his life takes over his entire being. And either as a plea for attention for help, or to forget about the previous pains dealing with a life surrounded by bullies, his already emotional state of mind becomes amplified, and he resorts to using blades to forget the previous pains. As life progresses in a world where he doesn't fit in, and those trying to help him only want to control him, he falls into their peer pressure and sees that his biggest enemy is his own disability. Himself. But he fights it. He fights back the fear. He fought back the cutting. He fought back against his own dark emotions. He went through the Master Fortress, his own mind, his own thoughts, his own feelings, got to the pulsating mess, the parts of his own mind that clouded his own judgment. He got to the core of the problem and smashed it away, using what he loves most, Nintendo. He found friends that he could fit in with, fellow Nintendo fans, and even those gamers who didn't grow up strictly on Nintendo. And even though some friends leave, there are always others that will pop up, defend, and support him, cheering him on to smash away the darkness. Life can be good, even if you are neurologically diverse, and that is what Super Smash Bros. Stands for. In response to the character Takamaru being a new assist trophy in Smash Bros., many Westerners are wondering just who this character is and what his story is. Robert Howtrier says, "You should make a video on the whole Takamaru story." Okay. The year is 1985, and Nezo no Murasame-jo, or The Mysterious Murasame Castle, is released on the Famicom Disk System. But only in Japan. It features a character named Takamaru, a young samurai apprentice traveling through the Edo period in Japan. And then out of nowhere, aliens attack. Aliens that can bring life to statues and mind control the lords of each castle. The gameplay is similar to the original Legend of Zelda, though instead of raiding dungeons, you're storming castles, and eventually make your way to the aliens' world and kill their leader. Also, unlike Legend of Zelda, instead of traveling through the big open world of Hyrule, you are instead traveling through a very linear land. Point A to point B levels. Also, items and power-ups are very limited, causing you to rely more on your katana and shuriken skills. The game did alright in Japan, though when they released The Legend of Zelda not too long after, it did a lot better, especially since its more generic fantasy setting allows it to appeal to a wider audience and be shipped overseas. With this game being as overshadowed by The Legend of Zelda as it was, it never received a proper sequel, just a bunch of ports. So it remains one of Nintendo's hidden gems. But no hidden gem goes forgotten. Takamaru is a sticker in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and has a micro-game in WarioWare DIY. So that's what he's become now, huh? Sticker status? No, there's more. He appears as a guest character in Samurai Warriors 3, appears on Mimin Island in Captain Rainbow, though that whole game is about a bunch of forgotten Nintendo characters, so there's that. Though also, the Ninja Star throwing game in Nintendo Land is based on his game. And most recently, he has been announced as a new assist trophy in Smash Bros. 4. But being an assist trophy definitely won't help Color TV Game 15. Because no one will remember it as Color TV Game 15. Everyone will remember it as Pong. It's not Pong. Like Takamaru, the Prince of Sable is another Japanese-only Nintendo character that was recently confirmed for Smash Bros. As an assist trophy. So who is this guy? Prince Sable is from the 1992 Japanese Game Boy game, let me get this here, Kiaru no Tame ni Kare wa Naru, or in English, For the Frog Bell Tolls. The exploration is very similar to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, though when you transform into a frog, the game shifts from the bird's eye view to a 2D side-scroller. Oh yeah, your character turns into a frog. And a snake! Another major difference is the combat. While in The Legend of Zelda, you press a button and you swing your sword, in Frog Bell, you touch an enemy and whoosh! It automatically sends you into a typical RPG automatic combat. Woo! As for the story, it's your typical save the princess story. But there's a twist! You have a rival prince who is also trying to save the princess. He isn't a bad guy, per se. You're just two princes after the same goal. Oh, and while Prince Sable can turn into a frog, Prince Richard, his rival over here, has a huge collection of pet frogs. Go figure. Oh, and here's a fun fact. In The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, you can actually meet Prince Richard. He's the guy in the room with all the frogs. Neat. Now, as for the prince, he is young and in combat training, politics training, and is pretty naive about how the world around him works. Kind of like every other young royal subject in everything. And he and Prince Richard have been rivals since forever. Sable exceeds the skills of Prince Richard in every way, except for combat. Of course. And Sable's hot-headedness and such led him to buy a boat immediately when he found out that Richard and his navy was going out to save a princess. Sable would not lose to him again! All in all, For the Frog Bell Tolls is another one of Nintendo's little hidden games that was never brought to the US. And for a good reason. There's nothing really Nintendo about it. It's not special in any way. It feels like it could be made by any generic RPG making company. But it is still nice to see a little piece of Nintendo's history making it into Smash Bros. And I hope more things like that are to come. So until next time, thanks for watching, and keep on smashing on!
This controversy has gone on long enough. It ends now. The year is 2012, and an interview with Miyamoto with a focus of Bowser Jr.'s relationship with the Koopalings as well as Bowser Jr.'s mother was had. His response? He just took the Koopalings, one of the greatest ensemble dark horses in history, characters that have a giant fanfiction website all about them, multiple websites, and he killed their point. Thank you! But really now, how could he be so blind? Unless we're the ones who are blind. Let's use science. Genetics can be pretty simple. If you've passed high school, you should at least know the basics of how they work. Specific genetic traits of the father are matched with the mother, and certain traits are picked up from each of them to create a new baby. It's not all that complicated for humans when you think about it in this broad, vague, and generic sense. But when you get into the specifics of DNA and recessive genes and chance and... Oh, the memories of biology class! Since Bowser has a somewhat anthropomorphic build to him, we can say that he has at least a small bit of genes similar to humans. Let's write down some notes for him, and then the Koopalings. Let's see. We'll write down some of the most common physical traits that can be observed with his children. Dimples, handedness, hairline shape, PTC tasting, fire breathing, much simpler. Cleft, issues with eyesight, and eye color. However, some obvious ones like hair color and the classic rolling tongue had to be removed since they are incredibly difficult to prove. Now then, it's hard to believe that one of the most fearsome menaces in the Mushroom Kingdom has dimples, but there they are.
And they're so cute!
Now, we carefully examine the Koopalings, and we see that many of them do not have such a trait, with the exception of two, Larry and Iggy Koopa. So chalk a point up for them. Many pictures of Bowser using tools depict him using his left hand to utilize them, basically explaining his dominant side as left. Who knew? Looking at the way the Koopalings hold their wand, you'll notice that none of them seem to really favor one arm over the other. So the Koopalings must be ambidextrous. So scratch them all off for that one. This one's a bit of a stretch, but we can gather some data from it. Bowser's hair usually comes up to a widow's peak, just like Lemmy and Ludwig. Morton, assuming his 3 hairs could turn into a long flowing mullet of awesome, would most likely have one too. And according to Wendy's human form in the TV show, she could have one as well. However, Larry and Iggy seem to have straight hairdos, and Roy is bald, so they don't qualify. Fortunately, all the Koopalings seem to share this power with him, as seen in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. If Bowser has at least one very dominant trait, it's this one. It seems as if Bowser has some poor eyesight. Like seriously, you can't see Peach reading your own diary from no more than 10 feet away? Bowser, you need glasses. You clearly must be nearsighted. The only 2 Koopalings who wear glasses are Iggy and Roy. Let's assume Iggy suffers from the same fate as his father. And let's make a best case scenario out of this in saying that Roy needs the same, but wears prescription sunglasses because he works in Skyland.
Why do we work so close to the sign?
Meh. Bowser possibly has the greatest cleft in the history of video games, and Morton possibly has the second greatest cleft. The rest, however, don't have any at all. Upon inspection of Bowser's eyes, we can see that his eyes resemble a red or amber color. Okay, so let's immediately take out Roy, because I don't think he's ever been seen without his sunglasses. Because again, that's Skyland. Meh. Ludwig and Morton seem to have hazel-colored eyes, Wendy and Larry seem to have blue eyes, Iggy and Lemmy don't seem to have colored eyes at all, so none of them seem to share that same eye color with their supposed father. And telling of the results is pretty disappointing. The only ones who kind of match up to Bowser is Iggy and Morton. But now think of it this way. This is illogical. According to the normal traits of a standard Koopa, Bowser is filled with recessive traits. So his mate would have to be a freak!
That's one hot mama.
So yeah, this is what Bowser's wife looks like. Oh, you're not convinced? Well good, because here's the real kicker. Despite what their name implies, the Koopalings aren't Koopas. Look at all the Koopalings. Bowser, and a standard everyday Koopa. Do you see what each of the Koopalings lack in comparison to Bowser and all the other Koopas? You see it? It's hiding in plain sight. Just like your nose. You are now aware that your nose is in your vision. But yeah, noses! It's their noses! In the Koopa Kingdom, all Koopas share at least one common factor. They all have extremely large noses. This important feature is what all of the Koopalings severely lack. If the Koopalings are truly Bowser's offspring, then at least one of them would have to include this Koopa-defining feature. But if the Koopalings aren't Koopas, then what are they? They're Boom Booms! Boom Booms are a separate species from the Koopas, but they share plenty of similar features to them. But they lack that defining nose. And simply comparing the Koopalings to Bowser and the Koopalings to Boom Booms, the evidence is clear. And don't forget, it just so happens that the games that feature the Koopalings also feature Boom Booms as an enemy. So if the Koopalings aren't Bowser's children, then why would they refer to Bowser as their father? Maybe he's adopted them, took them in as his apprentices, or needed some generals to lead his army. Young ones that won't grow stale like he did. And since they were raised by Bowser, the young Koopalings see him as a father figure. So there you have it. The Koopalings are not the biological underlings of the Koopa King. Bowser Jr. literally is Bowser's only child. Makes sense, as he's technically the oldest out of the Koopalings. But wait, Miyamoto also said that Bowser Jr. is not the child of Bowser and Peach. He actually has no idea who his mother is. So who's the mother that gave us this character?
There is a fan theory going about that states that Bowser Jr. is the son of Bowser and Peach, even though at the end of Mario Sunshine, Bowser clearly states that she isn't.
Junior, I've got something difficult to tell you about Princess Peach.
I know, she's not really my mama.
But he may have just been saying that to keep Bowser Jr. from knowing the real reason why he kidnaps her. But if it's not Peach, then who is Bowser Jr.'s mother? Bowser's mate? Well, that's elementary, my dear viewer. The answer has been staring you in the face this entire time. Bowser Jr.'s mother is... absolutely no one! Despite having some human elements, Bowser is a Koopa who lives in a world where lava causes you to bounce. The Mushroom Kingdom and its surrounding area clearly isn't Earth, so what I'm about to say may be much more common in the Mushroom Kingdom than it is here on Earth. It is entirely possible that Bowser is asexual. He doesn't need a mate to reproduce. The notable members of the Koopa Kingdom are vastly more male than female, so by basic reproduction standards, it'd be near impossible for them to sustain their population number in the Mushroom Kingdom, especially with the rate at which Mario is dealing with them. So how are there so many Koopas? They reproduce asexually, much like the whiptail lizard. The whiptail lizard needs no mate to reproduce, and as a result, they don't share their genes with another lizard to create a new lizard. The baby lizards are exact copies of the parent, like cloning, but not as cool. And notice that most Koopas look exactly the same. Or rather, there are only a few variations, and within those variations they look exactly the same. So if Bowser were to reproduce asexually, his child would look exactly like him, or at least exactly like he would when he was younger. Looking at Yoshi's Island DS, we look into the past when Bowser was a baby. This is Bowser as a child, and this is Bowser's son. They look almost exactly the same, if not completely exactly the same. It's pretty clear now. So that is my theory. Bowser reproduces asexually. A long time ago, the angry video game nerd made a small comment about how the 7 Koopalings represent the 7 deadly sins. On paper, it sounds ridiculous, as the episode was focused on making Super Mario Bros. 3 into a demonic entity.
This game worships the devil. Oh my god, of course it does. Why is there so many inverted crosses? Pentagram, well of course the pentagram makes an appearance everywhere. It's no doubt that the 7 sons of Bowser represent the 7 deadly sins.
But now, we were wondering if you could actually do this. Could the 7 deadly sins actually be applied to each individual Koopaling? 7 symbols of Bowser's sinful syndrome? Ludwig is the biggest and the largest, and many fan interpretations have made him a big eater, so he's nice, round, and fat, and mostly toothless. He is the symbol of gluttony. Morton's Super Mario Bros. 3 strategy guide bio describes him as a grouch, and I don't think we've ever seen Morton really happy at all. He's always been angry, or wrathful. Wendy constantly looks at herself in the mirror. Heck, her nickname used to be Cootie Pie.
I told you this was no job for a beauty queen!
Someone so obsessed with themselves and their own beauty is clearly a symbol of pride. Lemmy's description in the Super Mario Bros. 3 guide claims he'd rather be in the circus than being a supervillain. He only really cares about riding around on his balls, usually being one of the easiest Koopalings to beat. This attitude of his makes him the symbol of sloth. Roy, thanks to his wicked awesome sunglasses, is clearly a pimp that lives in the high and mighty Skyland. So he obviously gets chicks all the time. He's also pink, symbolic of love. So you could stretch that to say he's the symbol of lust. Larry's nickname is known as Cheatsy, known for simply stealing and cheating. Those are his main traits. Both these traits, of course, leads to him being the symbol of greed. Finally, this leaves Iggy, the middle child, constantly forgotten. Heck, I forgot to include him at first. But he's gone mad at not being noticed, so he's changed into a loon with a new haircut. Because of his hatred of not getting noticed, he is filled with the final deadly sin: envy. So there you have it.
The 7 deadliest sins attached to the 7 deadliest Koopalings. But it is just a hypothesis.
It's a great video, except for one thing. It's wrong. Now, don't mistake what I'm saying. I can't blame them. We've all been suckered in by the Sega propaganda machine.
Time to make a rebuttal. Okay, so first, a reiterated point about your Sonic video. I think if we're going to measure Mario's height, Super Mario Bros. Is not the best source to cite, because there are several graphical inconsistencies. And as I've stated before, I can see that if that is 5'10", then that is 9. But is this full-sized Peach, or Unsuper Peach? Now, we could make the point about Mario's height not being accurate when analyzing the distance of the pipe, but I think it's more impressive to determine Mario's speed in one of the new Super Mario Bros. Games. But we're not going to focus on Mario, that's a whole different debate. We're only focusing on Sonic.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
First, take a look at what you did. You decided to take Sonic's true height by comparing him to Elise from Sonic 06. You determined that Sonic is 1.1 meters. Fair enough, good job on the math. This version of Sonic is undoubtedly 1.1 meters. But then you went on to use this version's height and applied it to the very first Sonic game. First off, you should never do that, unless you absolutely have to. Secondly, that's a huge mistake. As we see in Sonic Generations, modern Sonic, the Sonic from Sonic 06, is significantly taller than classic Sonic, the Sonic from the original trilogy. Plus, you are calculating the flat distance of Green Hill Zone. You aren't taking into account all of the jumps, loops, and hills that Sonic has to run up and down. Plus, we should know, this is Sonic's first adventure. He knows he's fast, but he's inexperienced. He doesn't know his top speed, he probably can't even reach close to it. So let's move on to a more modern Sonic game. Our second point ironically comes from possibly the worst Sonic game ever created. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, Sonic is occasionally involved in Mach speed sections. Mach 1 means that you are moving at the speed of sound. So naturally, Mach speed sections must infer to the moments in the track that Sonic is going to speed up fast enough to break the speed of sound. In these sections, Eggman is usually the target focus. And knowing the good old doctor, he's probably pumped his machines up to make sure they can outrun Sonic. So the idea of Eggman being faster would make sense. Even Eggman himself, he's probably wearing supersonic speed-up shoes. While many have complained about these sections of Sonic stages in the game, these sections provide a majorly gigantic point about Sonic's trademark maneuvers. Moving at the speed of sound would make the game incredibly unfun. These Mach speed sections are by far the shortest in the game, usually averaging little over a minute. And if you touch anything, even stuff like rocks, you are mortally wounded. Now, if Sonic isn't even moving at his quickest, if at this speed you're taking 2 hits and you're dead, imagine what would happen if Sonic did these speeds in other Sonic games. Imagine you were playing Zone 2 in Sonic the same way you did the Mach speed sections. You'd never live through Act 1 because all of the walls would simply kill you. You're going too fast to have control over your own motions, and the aspect of realism thrown in just makes it unplayable. Even if we didn't count the idea that touching the walls means insta-death, if playing a Sonic game would be as short as you say it would at these speeds,
the speed run for the entirety of the first Sonic game would be less than a minute long.
Why would anyone buy it? It'd be criticized worse than Sonic 06, and that is definitely saying something.
He just keeps saying it's no use. I mean, he's true, he's right. He does not lie. The coin keeps coming back into me. The ring keeps coming back into me. I can't. I'm an endless. I can't die. I can't die.
You know how moviegoers and video game fans like to ask the question, why can't so-and-so just find the solution now? Why can't Mario jump over this cardboard block? Why doesn't Mega Man just shoot Wily in the head? Why doesn't Batman just break Joker's neck? The bottom line to these questions is, we want to continue funding this series, and being too realistic would ruin sales. And that isn't even a cold business answer, it's true. If Sonic was made so that Sonic could always run at the speed of sound, the first game would end up like this.
Mwahaha! I am the evil Dr. Robotnik, and I have come to—
That's it. Sonic kills Eggman, and there's nothing really left for him to do. And Sega loses its biggest money-making series of all time. But Sonic 06 isn't the only game I wish to touch upon. Let's look at Sonic Unleashed, particularly the area you mentioned in your video. You start off this level with your speed bar maxed out, Sonic's supposed maximum speed, and based on your calculations,
meaning that at most, he's running 80 meters per second.
But now look closely. You can see that when Sonic boosts up, he also moves to the left and right, while not losing any speed. In fact, he moves to the left and right pretty fast. This would mean that he can keep up with his speed of 80 meters per second
while moving an extra distance left or right. After all, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Diagonal distance is always longer than vertical or horizontal. The ability to keep your speed the same while moving left or right would not only make Sonic's top speed faster, it would make his acceleration far faster. You see no build-up to his dodge left or right, he just goes. In this video, he moves about 11 Sonics to the left without speed loss. Considering he is 1/3 of his length wide, that makes him 0.36 meters wide. Times 11, this means the distance Sonic is going is 3.96 extra meters while accelerating. If his speed is 80 meters per second, as you say, we need to do this number times the distance he is running, because this isn't just extra distance. To keep a certain speed limit while doing distance is, according to simple math, multiplied by the amount of speed, not plus. So 80 meters times 3.96 would make his speed 316.8 meters per second while moving left or right at the rate he is going. And looking at this makes sense. Sonic is running forward fast. Yes, you can see him doing so and the buildings are going by. But when he moves to the left or right, he is much more that blue blur we always hear Sonic being referred to as. He just darts left and right while still maintaining that constant speed forward. The only truth in this video is that the game developers are lying when they tell you that Sonic is at his maximum speed, because he clearly moves faster when going left or right. Still not faster than sound, but this calculation was made entirely on your previous calculation, which are based on the measurements of a building which you cannot be sure of what its real measurements are. A much better way to determine how fast he is would be the time reference. If you know he moved a distance of 3.96 meters to the left, and he did this in approximately 1/7 of a second, this would mean he moves 3.96 meters in 142,857 milliseconds. The distance a car travels driving 108 kilometers an hour in that time is 3 centimeters, or 0.3 meters. Now we see what the speed of Sonic is in meters per second. Math, math, math. This would make 27.72 meters per second. Not that much, you would think. But that is not his actual speed, since he is moving forward the entire time he's moving sideways too. This would mean that 27.72 meters per second is his acceleration speed. You could make further calculations considering what the actual top speed of Sonic would be. Note, he's not doing it here, or in any game we can see, yet. The distance Sonic could entirely move to the left, and calculating this out further would make 2,340.6 meters per second in acceleration, because it is almost 23 times his body width. But this is just an educated estimate, I rounded a bit. This could or could not be Sonic's true top speed. Assuming Sonic is moving at 80 meters per second here, you could come up with a lot of different numbers. But then, like MatPat making his cross-dressing to anti-LGBT episode, I suddenly came to what probably is the biggest answer to this whole debate. No matter how many numbers we throw around, the way Sonic's speed is portrayed in the game doesn't matter. Because there is one point that truly stands out. Sonic isn't moving faster than the speed of sound. Simply because he doesn't want to. Now, this isn't a cop-out for an answer. Hear me out, Noggineers and game theorists. Answer me this. What is the one thing Sonic will always care about? Other than chili dogs.
Home sweet home! Woo-wee! 2 doggies with the works, pal.
You got it, bud!
Sonic!
The protection of his environment. Sonic has a very clear environmentalist theme in his early games. The struggle between Eggman the developer, who wants to build gigantic cities and empires based around him and his robots, and Sonic the Hedgehog, who will do anything to protect his woodland creatures and precious Mobius from turning into an urban Skid Row. Do you know what the effects of a sonic boom can create? In layman's terms, Sonic would basically be causing a small invisible explosion while he's running, with lots of wind brushing past the areas he goes to. At the speed he'd be going, the wind alone would be pulling up trees and rocks and causing all sorts of damage. If Sonic did sprint at the speed of sound, he'd be destroying the land he vowed to protect. Yeah, Sonic can be a jerk at times, but his dedication to preserving his home will always be his first quality. Even in urban areas, Sonic tries to keep his speed down because the effects of a sonic boom in a city environment can cause tons of damage and injure those around him. Windows would break, buildings would weaken, pedestrians would have to constantly hear those stupid sonic booms on a daily basis, and if they're close enough to the sonic boom, they could go deaf. This so-called top speed bar in Sonic Unleashed isn't his real top speed. It's as fast as he's willing to go while in a city. And even then, that's still wrong. Remember that we figured out when he is dodging to the left or right for his own safety, he is going 316 meters per second. That's just below the sound barrier with a bit of a safety net in case he accidentally goes a little faster. He's trying his hardest not to break the sound barrier while inside this city, because it would hurt people and cause all kinds of damage. The only time Sonic would feel the need to are in Eggman's areas, the locations where Sonic wouldn't need to care because he would be destroying the headquarters of the man planning to destroy Mobius. But he still doesn't run at these speeds because of the whole crashing into walls and dying part. Eggman's areas have tons of traps in them. Sonic is like Superman in this sense. He always holds back his strongest powers unless absolutely necessary in order to protect the people he loves. And that's what Sonic stands for. But hey, it's just a rebuttal. A game theory rebuttal. Haha, see what I did there? I took his catchphrase and forget it, I'm sorry about that. So I noticed a lot of you mentioned that Sonic runs crazy fast in the cartoon and the comics. And this is true, but it is debatable as to whether the comics, cartoon, and the video games are all the same canon. And using the rules Matt Pet set, only using video games because he is originally a video game character, seems like a good idea. So a lot of you were mentioning Sonic CD, because in this game, Sonic runs so fast that he time travels. But again, actually looking at the speed he's running, that's obvious. He's obviously not running much faster. It has a lot more to do with these signposts that you have to run by to start time traveling. They inject Sonic with DeLorean science, and as we know from Back to the Future,
when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
You don't even have to go that fast to time travel. So I looked around some more and more, and then eventually found out Sonic CD actually is the best game to see just how fast Sonic can run. Granted, it's not during gameplay, it's during a cutscene, because as I stated before, playing at this speed would be ridiculous. In this cutscene, we see Sonic running at incredible speeds through a rocky desert. But notice that when he reaches the forest, something that is populated by animals he's trying to save, he is going a bit slower, even though this is an emergency situation. He needs to get to Dr. Robotnik fast, or nature might end as a whole. So, he runs at these incredible speeds when going through areas that are either sparsely or not at all populated by anything. Now we reach the part where we get to do some calculations. Sonic has to run up this chain to get to Robotnik's metropolis. Okay, whoa, that was fast. Look at the distance. You can see the sonic boom he causes on the surface of the water, then less than a second later, he's already super high up. And I mean, this is just some ordinary chain ride. Oh my goodness, these chain links are huge! And if we use classic Sonic's height of 0.72 meters, we can see that they are roughly 3.5 Sonics long. So that's about 2.52 meters. So now, there is no way of knowing how many links he just flew up in such a short amount of time, because we are so many links up, by the time you see where they are attached to the ground, they are just specks on the screen. But I think it's safe to say Sonic broke the sound barrier here, hence the sonic boom we see in the water. And hence the theme song. Now pay attention to the first few links Sonic climbs up. Because he just landed, he's still gathering his footing. Then look at this. Right as his feet became that classic blurry circle, in just under 1 second, he went from this link to not even seeable. We can only see him go about 12 links in that quarter of a second before he is so far away he's just a smear. Using just these 12 chain links, this would make Sonic running at 30.24 meters in a quarter second, meaning 120 meters per second. And note, this is assuming he didn't keep accelerating after we can no longer see him. And if we are to believe that the camera is following him all the way up, and if you look very closely, very closely, you see a little sparkle. Possibly that's where he is at that point, meaning the camera is following him up the whole way. Then from the time he started to rocket off to the time he made it here, which is just under 1 second, he would have been traveling at obscene speeds, never before seen in any Sonic game, well beyond the speed of sound a few times over.
But Lockstin, if Sonic can travel that fast in a cutscene, why doesn't he do the same in a game?
Well, easy. The same points we covered in the previous video. He doesn't want to, it's too dangerous. Sonic was only running at these speeds because first, he was in an open rocky desert, and then when he got to this chain, he ran insanely faster than that, because he's up in the air. On a massive and powerful chain, sonic booms can't cause any damage up here, so this is one of the few chances he has to run at his true top speed without fear of damaging anything. Even in Robotnik's lair, he doesn't want to run too fast because he could cause the roof to collapse in on him, or run into spikes. So Sonic's top speed, as we see here, is immeasurable to anyone who isn't a major mathematician and can accurately calculate the size of that sphere, its distance from the ground, the number of chain links, etc. But we do know that right here, in this moment, Sonic finally got to fulfill his dream. His dream of rolling around at the speed of sound. The Lombax. That's the species that Ratchet from Ratchet & Clank is. The Lombax is known for quite a few things. Primarily, it's their rarity, as Ratchet is one of the only few left in existence. But why is he one of the only few left? Well, it's not so simple as to say that Lombaxes are an endangered species, or they started to die out, or there was some massive war. But no, the Lombax species just decided to just get up and leave this reality. The evil Percival Tachyon wanted them dead, so they just, yeah, we're done. We're just gonna go ahead and leave the universe now, bye.
Crap, I left the oven on!
But considering how difficult it is to move an entire species, some of course got left behind, including these three. But anyway, if Percival hated the Lombaxes so much, then why didn't he follow them into their own dimension, and continue with this genocide? Well, because he didn't have the technology to. Because the Lombax were the only ones with this sort of technology. Lombaxes were also known for being the most technologically advanced species in the universe. The average Lombax was more tech-savvy than most inventors and computer scientists of other species. And almost all of their technology is customized too. According to the smuggler, Lombaxes never used unmodified gadgets. And the Lombaxes weren't only advanced in tech and gadgets, but with weaponry too. But have you ever stopped and wondered why this is the case? Why are Lombaxes the most intelligent and advanced species in the universe? Usually, in science fiction, you expect the most advanced species to have huge heads and scaly, wet bodies, or possibly even giant brains sticking out of their heads and tentacles everywhere, or have put their brains into machines. Typically, you wouldn't look at these adorable cattish things and assume them to be extremely intelligent, especially when others look like this. They just look a lot smarter, but they're not. So why are they so much smarter? Well, it may not exactly have to do with their smartness, as much as it does their circumstances. While playing through the Ratchet & Clank series, you may notice something. Quark, the human or whatever, the human-esque thing, only has 3 fingers. Now look at almost every other species on top of that, even every other robot, even Clank. They all only have 3 fingers. But now look at the Lombaxes. 5 fingers? Now, I'm not saying that more fingers equals more intelligence. If that was the case, I'm sure incest would be a lot more popular. No, I believe it's just that with 5 fingers, you can do a lot more with tiny electronic parts. And keyboards. Take your hand and tape down your middle finger and ring finger, like a Spider-Man. Now try typing a sentence into the comments as fast as you can. It takes a lot longer and it's a bit more complicated, isn't it? Maybe it's just because you're not used to it, but if you were born with only 3 fingers, maybe you would be. Would be easier, sure, but you would still not be as fast as someone with 5 fingers. And this is just typing. Now try writing. Now try soldering. Now try eating with chopsticks. Now try writing with soldered chopsticks.
What in blazes is that?
So with more fingers, you can see why Lombaxes are so good with tech and weapons and stuff. They can do a lot more things easily that the rest of the universe would see as too complicated and clumsy. This is also why Lombaxes would always customize things. They're living in a universe where almost everything has 3 fingers. If they were to buy a gun, odds are it's built for someone with 3 fingers, because that's the norm. Just like how video game controllers and mice are mainly built for people with right hands, because most people are right-handed. Only 10% of people are left-handed. And now consider an entire universe, where thousands, tens of thousands, possibly even hundreds of thousands of species only have 3 fingers, and then a select few species have 5. So if Lombaxes ever want to use their weapons to their full capability, they'd need to modify it, to make room for their extra fingers, or to modify it more so and make it so each finger movement equals something different. So now, if you are in a place
where everyone compared to you is slow at doing things like typing on a keyboard, holding things, pressing buttons, firing weapons, then odds are you have an advantage over most of them. And with that advantage, you're not necessarily more intelligent, but as a species, you advance faster because you can do things faster and less clumsily. Write faster, thus transfer information faster, thus advance to computers faster, thus type faster, thus transfer information faster, thus advance computer technology faster, thus build a better defense system. No need to fight wars. Put all that effort towards advancing even faster. Advance so fast that you decide to leave the universe.
Who has 2 thumbs and just got engaged? Well, probably a lot of people, but one of them is me. So these are my top 5 picks for the best weddings in video games.
Number 5. Bowser and Peach, Super Paper Mario. While thankfully this wedding winds up not working out, this forced wedding is what motivated Mario to step up once again and save Peach from the clutches of Bowser and Count Black. Plus, isn't Paper Peach in a bridal dress just so adorable? And speaking of this wedding, weddings don't seem to work out in the Mario universe too well. At the wedding of Valentina and Booster from Super Mario RPG, after failing to stop Mario and the gang, they set aside their villainous ways and decided their lives would be better spent together. At least until Booster decided he just couldn't do it and ran off. Number 4. Elaine and LeChuck in The Secret of Monkey Island. From the villainous pirate captain LeChuck's perspective, this was a legitimate wedding. But Elaine had a plan. A plan to fake a wedding with LeChuck in order to get close enough to eventually kill him, and rid the world of the source of all evil. Pretty smart, but she did forget one detail. She never told her actual beloved, the Monkey Island protagonist Guybrush, the plan. So upon discovering the wedding, he did everything he could to stop it. Oh jeez. Number 3. Marle and Chrono, from Chrono Trigger. In one of the many endings in this classic JRPG, we see that after their adventures together, they decided the best thing to do was to show their affection for one another in the greatest way possible. By being married. And not just them. This ending also has Ayla and Kino getting married too. Almost out of nowhere. Number 2, pretty much every marriage in the Rune Factory series. You could also put Harvest Moon here, but personally, I prefer the Rune Factory series. It's not only a farm simulator and dating sim, but also an RPG with monsters and dungeons. You can marry any one of the young girls in the village, though personally I'll have to give this spot to Rune Factory 3's Micah and Carmen, Raven being a close second. From what I've played and heard, Carmen's was the most like actual romance, while many of the other characters are more akin to you becoming really close friends than just deciding to get married because you're just close friends. That happens, right? Carmen's story arc was the most like the romantic comedies we see in film, full of fun, quirky, awkward love. Number 1. Meryl and Johnny of Metal Gear Solid 4. In a series with as many plot twists and comedic satire on the espionage genre as Metal Gear Solid 4, something like a wedding between the comic relief with stomach problems character and the woman with a strong sense of leadership and tactics getting hitched may not completely come as a surprise. Throughout the Metal Gear Solid franchise, Johnny has been eyeing Meryl, and did everything he could to be in the squad that she's the captain of. When they are running low on ammunition, and cornered, and have a very low chance of survival, Johnny decided that now is the best time to pop the question.
Meryl, marry me. He's got a hell of a sense of timing. What do you say? I have to say, no. Why? Is there something wrong with me? No. I'd just rather do things my way. Johnny. Marry me.
Huh? It's just so adorable. They're killing people in sync.
You know, it's surprisingly difficult to find games with weddings outside the realm of dating simulators. They provide a large plot point and are a good way of portraying character emotion. I feel that more game writers should bring them into their games, at least as one possible ending, or better yet, don't make it an ending, put it in the middle of a game. Bring in more character development and show how the married life changes a certain character, for better or worse. Love changes people. You can be the biggest, toughest, strongest man in the world, but no matter what, you're no match for your wife, because you love her. You could be the biggest loser imaginable, but then you decide you want to do better. You have to do better, for the ones you love. No matter how stern you are, how emotionless, how evil, when you truly fall for someone, you begin to feel again, because you care more about the other person than you do yourself. You take a bullet for them. You live to love them. It's beautiful. And you're beautiful. So stay beautiful. And keep using your head. Anyone who's played TF2 knows exactly what I'm talking about. You get a pretty good kill streak going with the sniper.
Boom! Headshot!
Then some true potential for glory pops into your scope. A fully charged medic ready to deploy an Uber. You aim. The dot is on his forehead, and...
Oh dear, I've made quite a mess.
You didn't check your back. You thought you were safe, because your eyes have been on the only place the enemy can come from the whole time. But spies can evade your vision in the perfect way possible. Invisibility. So how does that work? There are a few ways for invisibility to occur, and as we advance through history, we are coming ever closer to true invisibility cloaks existing outside the realm of science fiction. One basic type that exists today is quite simple to comprehend. You cover an object with LEDs, and send a signal from a camera on the other side of the object to the LEDs to display. In this video, we see it's not perfect, and it's only being done to one side of the car. But as nanotechnologies advance, lighting and cameras will be able to continually shrink, possibly to the point of being woven into the very fabric of your fancy blue suit. This is possibly why the spy isn't too keen on getting dirty.
You got blood on my suit.
As it would disrupt his invisibility.
But Lockstin, there are no nanobots in Team Fortress 2?
That's just what they want you to think. Granted, TF2 is based in the latter half of the 20th century. Thanks to the fictional metal Australium, the country Australia has advanced its technology rapidly. This world has made teleporters, battle robots, hover cars, super healing mediguns, and of course, the invisibility cloak, which officially is made using Australium technology. And considering Sydney looks like this, who's to say nanobots don't exist?
Oh yeah? Well then why don't you ever see any?
Because they're nanobots. That is only one type of invisibility though. A more active type of cloak bends the light around itself via metamaterials. Researchers from the University of Texas have so far developed this suit using superconductive thin film. Actually, that's just a concept photo. They haven't gotten that far yet. But what they have managed to do is make a material that is completely invisible to one color at a time, and only works on small-scale tests so far. But they're getting there. A metamaterial is a man-made physical object that has effects completely unknown to nature. This specific one is built to send radiation around it and out the other side, using magnets and a lattice of tightly fitted elements, mainly copper and polycarbonate. In this case, the radiation is visible light, but one material does not work on all wavelengths of radiation. Each material can only do this to a small range of frequencies. As you should or should have learned in high school, visible light is only a small part of radiation. It spreads far out into microwaves and gamma rays and whatnot. And while originally these metamaterials were built as shields to protect people from harmful radiation, they have moved the range of radiation these suits work with into the more visible forms of radiation. However, the total range of frequencies that any one material can have go around itself is not great enough to cover the entire visual spectrum. For example, right now they could have a suit be completely invisible to the color red. Put the guy in a room with a red light and you will not be able to see the slightest trace of him. But put him in a room with any other color light and he is just as obvious to see as one of your own team members coming out of the enemy spawn point. Of course, even if this technology was somehow perfected to cover nearly the entire spectrum of visible light, a feat most scientists are saying is impossible, there are still things that can disturb it. For instance, strong electromagnetism, or the material being bent and bumped a bit too much too suddenly. Of course, it wouldn't make you fully visible again, but rather you would be able to see the slight warping of the light where the cloak is, much like the spy in his semi-invisible state from being shot or bumped into. So think of it this way, the spy's suit is laced with this kind of material, perhaps replacing the copper with the fictional Australium, which alters it enough to allow it to go fully invisible. And when the watch is activated, it sends an electrical signal to the magnets in his suit, which activate the light-bending properties the spy is both loved and hated for.
Spies are f***ing bullshit!
Meanwhile, in our Australium-less world, while we may never achieve perfect spy cloaking, we will definitely reach the meta camo we see in Metal Gear Solid. When your suit can obtain the texture of a watermelon, you know it's good. Now listen to this.
So we're fine, as long as nobody teleports any bread.
Question.
What's your question, soldier?
I teleported bread.
What?
You told me to.
How much?
I have done nothing but teleport bread for 3 days.
So, how much bread is that exactly? So first, let's assume that, since this is their own base after all, their teleporter is at max level. 3. This means it takes about 3 seconds to recharge before starting to teleport the next loaf. Once charged, the teleportation happens instantly, and it immediately begins recharging once again. Now assuming that the soldier was not lying when he said,
I have done nothing but teleport bread for 3 days.
And knowing the soldier,
This is a bucket.
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
He probably wasn't. 3 days is 72 hours, but when they synchronized their watches, they only had 70 hours remaining. After the synchronization, about 1 minute and 25 seconds pass before the soldier finally has the opportunity to start teleporting bread. Also, the next time we see Soldier, he is with Demoman and Spy sometime after the alarm gets set off.
Drunk! Round. Soft. Oh, round.
Ravishing.
You too.
So let's assume that hearing that alarm be set off is what finally made him stop teleporting bread. At the same time the alarm was set off, we see some text tell us that there is 1 hour left until those 70 hours are up. Meaning, in actuality, Soldier did not teleport bread for 3 days straight, but rather, 72 hours is 259,200 seconds, minus the 3 hours, 1 minute and 25 seconds, since he was not teleporting bread, which is about 10,885 seconds. This means that Soldier was teleporting bread for a total of 248,315 seconds. Knowing this, and knowing that the first piece of bread will teleport without charging because it is already charged when he starts, we can say that the soldier teleported a grand total of 82,772 loaves of bread.
I teleported!
Now knowing that the average loaf of bread is about 12 by 6 by 6 inches, we can say that if you stacked all of these on end, it would reach over 15.5 miles into the air, and if you put them all into the deepest part of the ocean, the Marianas Trench, they would probably get washed away and eaten by fish, and you'd never see it again. Don't do that! There are starving people, and you're going to stack bread in the ocean? Many of you ask how the animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's are alive. Well, I hate to break it to you, but the animatronics in Freddy's Pizzeria are not alive. They are haunted. Haunted by the ghosts of the children who were killed by the previous Night Guard. But here's the actual truth of how they go about moving. Whether you believe it or not, typical ghost lore states that paranormal entities can affect objects and technology. Ghosts can move and push objects into completely new places, even stuff like heavy furniture. But similar to booze, they'd rather do it while not being watched, which is why the animatronics stay put and don't move when the camera sees them. With the exception of this jerk. These entities are usually called poltergeists, or psychokinetic phenomena. They slowly move the animatronics into your office, and when you're checking the cameras, the spirits can sense it, and when the time comes to attack, they turn the animatronics on and push it onto you. Now there are tons of questions about this game that people keep asking. Things like, why don't you just dress up in an animatronic suit too? That way when they come in and attack you, they just see that you're another suit person. Why don't you just burn the place down? Why do you need a security guard? Questions like that. Most of these questions are answered in the game by the guy on the phone, the owner of the place, if you actually listen. But there is a little bit of logic you could apply to this to answer the question, what is the best way of preventing them from killing you? It's not playing dead or wearing a suit. It is simply burning sage. With the common lore of poltergeists, the fumes that burning sage puts off prevents ghosts from coming too close. No ghosts? Nothing to push the animatronics into the room. And there you go. You're safe.
This debate is over!
Noggin.
So we all know that Sheik is actually Zelda.
She's what?
It's a 16-year-old game, what have you been doing?
But how?
And Sheik and Zelda are the same character in Smash Brothers.
You should have given a spoiler warning!
Get out of here. Ocarina of Time. Zelda runs away, goes into hiding to escape Ganondorf. Oh, who's the Sheik character? He's pretty cool. Oh, it's actually Zelda, a she.
Zelda's a she. Sheik. Sheik.
So for a while there has been some debate as to Sheik's gender, yet some people don't even know that there was a debate, because it seems clear as day to anyone who has finished the game that Sheik is just Zelda in disguise. But I mean, just search for Sheik Rule 34 on Google Images Safe Search Off, and you'll see just how much of a debate there really is. Actually, don't do that. Where the debate lies is that Zelda isn't just wrapped up in a bunch of cloth to hide her feminine features, but rather she is using magic to completely change her sex. I mean, what better disguise is there than completely changing your body? But does changing your body shape necessarily mean changing gender too? Looking at Sheik and Zelda, Sheik definitely has a much more masculine body. But I mean, look at those bandages, probably being used to push her breasts in. Well, I have seen plenty of breasts in my day, and I should probably stop that sentence. There is no right way for me to say this. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I was talking. Yeah, I was talking with a professional young woman. I got some answers. When squished down, breasts typically don't form into perfectly ripped man pecs. And more importantly, the shoulder-to-hip ratio is very masculine. There is no way these hips could belong to your typical woman, let alone Zelda when we look at her in other pictures. And even looking at these, how do these biceps and muscles become this lack of biceps and muscles? Many argue that shoulder pads and other paddings and bindings are used to make Zelda appear more masculine in this outfit. These would restrict movement though, something no ninja can do without. And if this was the case, anything physically that Sheik can do, Zelda could also do. And she can't. Sheik can do all these jumps and attacks. Jumps that could easily be made to escape this. But here, Zelda is helpless. She can't get out, because she doesn't have this well-toned and trained masculine body anymore. So it doesn't use padding, it's magic. A magical steroid and testosterone boost. There is obviously something of that nature going on here, but none of that dictates what goes on here. So let's look elsewhere. The player's guide always refers to Sheik as a young man, and everyone in the game refers to him as a he, but that could just be a testament to just how good this disguise is at hiding Zelda. In the Zelda manga, which is not entirely canon, I mean, Link talks in this, I'm just using this as another example. Zelda explains to Link that Impa locked young Zelda's consciousness away, to later awaken as a Sheikah boy, and grow up in that body, in that form. We can also look at other games that reference Sheik. The trophy data in Smash Bros. Melee says that the magic used only changed Zelda's hair, eye, and skin color, while in Brawl, it says that Sheik is just Zelda in disguise, and still a female. But what's interesting about this is that this only appears in the English versions of the game. In Japanese, they all state that Sheik is in fact a man. Zelda used magic to disguise herself as a man. While more recently, Sheik has always been referred to as a she in English, in Japanese, they always use the word seinen, which means young man. But why would they do this? To avoid controversy. The original idea could have been to have Zelda full-on transform in build, race, and sex. But then, Nintendo remembered that sex changes are controversial here in the United States. Even more so in the 90s. They don't want to lose sales because some parents don't like the whole sex change ordeal. So when translating everything, they make a few tweaks here and there, as to not cause this controversy. This isn't unheard of. Nintendo games go through all kinds of changes for the American versions of their games, from removing alcohol and blood to getting rid of any references to a character being transgender. They do this all the time, and with a series as big as Zelda and a character as popular as Sheik, they want to stay out of that realm of controversy as much as they can. And to this day, they are still trying to repair the potential damage to their reputation that having a big character go through a magical sex change could cause. Looking at all of the renditions of Sheik, as you reach closer and closer to modern day, Sheik is getting more and more feminine. And in this version, in Hyrule Warriors, Sheik doesn't even change race. I mean, come on, even Link did that in Majora's Mask. But back to Ocarina. The magic here is undoubtedly changing more than just the clothing. As we clearly see, it also changes muscle build, eye and skin color, the race, and the body proportions. And if the magic can change all this, who's to say it doesn't also change your genitals? Well, Nintendo can say. Very recently, with a reveal of Sheik in the new Hyrule Warriors, Bill Trinen of Nintendo stated, quote, "The definitive answer is that Sheik is a woman. Simply Zelda in a different outfit." And no matter how much we speculate, word of God is word of God. If Nintendo says something is a certain way, then it is a certain way. No amount of speculation can undo what the team who created it says. Sheik is undoubtedly female. But Bill Trinen is just the marketing manager for Nintendo of America. Remember that region where sex changes are still controversial? All this really means is that in Hyrule Warriors, in America, Sheik is definitely a woman. And yeah, I mean, look at this. Much, much more feminine than Ocarina of Time Sheik. And Hyrule Warriors isn't even a canon Zelda game anyway. So what do we know? We know that Bill Trinen, the only Nintendo employee to have said anything about this, says that Sheik is a woman, with Hyrule Warriors in context. We also know that Bill Trinen had absolutely nothing to do with the original creation of Sheik or Ocarina of Time. Nothing. We know that Nintendo doesn't like controversy, and is now trying to cover up the Sheik debate by making Sheik more and more feminine throughout the years. So I think it is safe to say that as of now, Sheik is officially female, but was that the original Japanese intention? I'm going to say no. Sheik here is originally male. There is too big of a body change for merely a change of clothing to be taking place. But I mean, you can take this all with a grain of salt. It is just a theory. Until the original creators come out and say it, there is no knowing for sure. Until then, we can all just stay awesome and keep using our noggins. Guys, this is the most important theory I've talked about in the last hour. Now, I don't know if you've heard about this game, because it is pretty underground, but Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars is the greatest $3 you could ever spend on PSN, if you have friends that can play it on the couch with you. Otherwise, it's eh. Anyway, the theory is that there are no humans in these cars, but rather, the cars themselves are alive. The existence of humans is not even hinted at in this game, and when I was playing it on my Let's Play channel, I somehow managed to glitch myself through the wall and into the audience, which was not full of people, but full of more Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket-Powered Battle Cars. So similar to the Pixar movie Cars, this world is a world inhabited not by humans, but by sentient cars. Though, unlike Cars 2, this world is actually entertaining. And if you don't believe me, you should check out G over T over here. It's a Let's Play channel featuring me and my friend Nolan, and what's really cool about it is that it's just so underground. And I would really, really hate if it were to go mainstream. Being mainstream ruins everything. Seriously. Age of Empires, anyone? And that soundbite right there, years after the third Age of Empires came out, became a small internet meme. What causes this sound to appear in the game is, well, you tell a priest to convert an enemy onto your side. And after some time of walla-lolling, the enemy unit gets converted into a friendly unit.
Convert catapults into Christianity!
may sound like some silly gibberish, but what if I told you it may actually have some meaning? The first Age of Empires is based in ancient times, BC to early AD. This means the game is based in the times when Latin was widely spoken, and that is all the information we need to figure this out. In classical Latin, V's are pronounced like English W's. So this Latin word, volo, is more accurately pronounced wolo. Wolo means I want, I get. To make it wololo, we need to add a lo to the end of the phrase. Lo is more vulgar Latin, meaning less classical, more spoken and less written, for him, meaning when the priest says, he is saying, I want him, referencing that he wants him to convert and join their side. The more you know.
Quick, what do Minecraft, Terraria, and Starbound all have in common? Besides, like, their whole premise of monsters, explore, create, build. What do you mean it's been 16 hours? It's 4 AM?
Noggin.
Random map generators have boomed in popularity recently, and that's not to say that they haven't been around a long time. Many RTS games have them. Age of Empires, anyone? Even looking back at games like The Elder Scrolls, Daggerfall, the wilderness between each town was randomly generated. Heck, the wilderness in Oblivion, the unimportant parts at least, those were randomly generated and then saved to the game too, because Bethesda is lazy. But recently, there has been a huge influx of games that utilize unique, randomly generated maps every time you play the game, and sometimes even every time you die. Games like Minecraft, Terraria, Starbound, Rogue Legacy, Cavern Kings, and even Pokemon Mystery Dungeon use random map generation. And while there are plenty of people who love games that utilize this, how many of those people actually understand how it works? Well, it's all in the programming, isn't it? The code. Well, that just sounds boring. Who would want to watch a video about that? Actually, it's quite interesting, especially when you start to consider just how random it really is. Or rather, isn't. Let's start with a fairly unknown game, one that's new to the scenes. Cavern Kings is an arena game where you dig deeper and deeper while leveling up and trying to survive, and each floor is randomly generated. Being a game with this simple premise and these small, simple maps makes its random map generation code elegantly simple, which means Cavern Kings is the perfect game to use as the starting example of how these maps are made. Without getting too deep into specifics, Cavern Kings uses a script that generates randomly sized rectangles and populates the maps with different block types put into these rectangles. It starts with the borders, and randomly picks a number for how many blocks thick the border will be there. Once all the borders are there, more numbers get randomized to decide if platforms should be created, then where, then how big. And it does this a few times. It then takes what it generated and mirrors it to make the map symmetrical. Now, it goes through and randomly picks some coordinates on the map to place crates and items and such. In the event of blocks stacking on top of one another, the block with the higher programmed priority gets used. At its core, this is basically how every game with random map generation will generate its maps. Some games like Spelunky will also do a check and make sure that it's actually possible to make it to the end of each level. If not, it will remake the map. All of these maps are made up of blocks, which really, just like any game, is just code. Each type of block has a specific number assigned to it. Numbers, math, randomness. What else is random and has numbers? Dice. To avoid getting into specific scripts and how each line affects every other line, I find that explaining this all with dice will help keep your mind from melting. Dice rolls are intrinsically random. The results vary each time you roll, and as far as Dungeons & Dragons is concerned, every roll is completely random and perfectly fair. When generating a new map, a computer will roll some dice to determine one thing, and then it will roll again to determine another, and again, and again, and again, possibly thousands of times per second, all depending on your processor speed. Let's look at Terraria for this example, as every time you generate a map, it tells you exactly what it's calculating.
It starts with a default, flat plain world of dirt, then rolls some dice to determine the terrain style of each area, be it grassland, desert, snow, whatever. It then places the sand in the desert area and rolls some more dice to determine where on the map to place some rocks, and then the size and shape of each rock. Same goes for clay and pretty much every other element deposit. Then some dice get rolled to decide where on the map you can find holes, followed by large caves. And I'm sure you get it by this point. Each dice roll, or more accurately, each script, edits the map by adding one more thing to it. Even things as small as hornets' nests and weeds get calculated this way. This is how many games go about calculating their maps. But even with all these steps and calculations, just how random is it really when you consider seeding? Some of these games will allow you to use seeds, which essentially are sequences of letters and/or numbers, which tells the computer exactly how to generate a map. If you took the same seed and put it on two different computers, you would get the same exact map twice. Doesn't sound so random now, does it? Remember, for something to be random, it has to be entirely unpredictable. If there is any bit of predictability, it's not random. And seeds are just that. Predictable instructions. Seeds tell the game exactly how to generate the map, block for block. It does this by taking the numbers you used as the seed and puts them through a large mathematical equation, usually involving a Mersenne twister. It pretty much always gives you a massive number in return, which gets put into the scripts in place of any dice rolls. And if you use letters in your seed, the game just converts them into numbers first, so it's not that complicated. Some may argue, but Lockstin, what if I just don't use a seed when I play these games? Then it doesn't have those forceful instructions. Well, arguing that standpoint would be wrong. In these seedable games, even if you don't give it a seed, there is still a seed somewhere buried deep in the code. The code generated its own seed. In a way, generating this seed is the only real dice roll involved. The only bit of randomness. It rolls the die to generate the seed, and then uses that seed to tell the game exactly how to build the world, converting numbers into block coordinates. So it would appear that these maps aren't actually randomly generated at all. The only randomness is determining the seed. Though, granted, the number of seeds available in a game is massive. I mean so massive that it's going to be a lot of fun to calculate. Using math! Omni, one of Starbound's game developers, did some calculations and found out the actual number of seeds available in the game, meaning the amount of maps. Which equals 422.22 quadrillion planets. And in Starbound, seeds are translated as coordinates for a planet, which I must say is pretty darn creative. So in Starbound, when you generate a new planet, you are essentially rolling a 422.22 quadrillion-sided die, which is a lot more than this. And the number that roll gives tells the game exactly how to generate the map. Programming! It's pretty simple stuff, right? And remember, your computer is calculating all of this. Come on, computer, you can do it! So, does this really mean that random map generators aren't actually randomly generating the map? All they do is randomize the seed? And that's the only bit of random in there? Well, yeah. And no. Yes, because yeah, it is. And no, because no, it's not. Just let me explain random. It may seem random, but that's only because of our human ignorance. Think about our analogy with actual dice rolls. In essence, these are random, but really, there are many reasons why you got the roll you got. Physics. You move your hand in a certain way, which makes the dice react in a certain way. The dice then also react to the table in a very specific and calculatable way. If we could know every detail about how the die in a die roll or the coin in a coin flip are moving, then the instant they left your hand, we could know exactly what the outcome will be. Our human imperfection is the only reason why rolls of dice and coin flips have different outcomes to begin with. If we had perfect precision, like that of this coin-flipping robot, then you could always achieve the outcome you want. This robot has yet to get a flip wrong. In computing, though, there are no rolls with actual dice. Everything is virtual. So can't a computer just throw a number at your face at random? No. Computers run completely logically. They only listen to instructions given to them, and these instructions have to be very specific. For instance, random.org is a website that does just that. Click the button, random number! Yay! But behind the scenes are layers and layers of code that tell it just how to choose that random number. There are two types of random numbers in computers: pseudo-random and true random. The fastest and thus most commonly used type is the pseudo-random, and pseudo-random number generators are just that. Pseudo. Very convincing, but fake nonetheless. They typically use linear congruential generators to predetermine a massive line of numbers. When you want another random number, it just gives you the next one down the line. This list of numbers is essentially random, and as far as the typical human is concerned, it is. But it's not. True random number generators, on the other hand, look at actual physical phenomena to generate a number. Most commonly used is atmospheric noise, the world's weather at one exact instant, put into code, then through an equation. The weather of the world changes all the time, every instant, and every little thing can affect it. If a butterfly in Australia flaps its wings, it can make a different number be randomized. But even then, if for one instant you can know where every particle in the atmosphere is, and what it is doing, and how every other particle will affect it, then you would be the world's greatest weatherman, and you should seriously take that up as your career. Which means, to someone with superhuman perception, this number is predictable. Which means, it's not random. So really, if you could, just for one instance, know where every particle in the universe is, and what it is currently doing, you could know the entire future of the entire universe. Is nothing random? Is everything predictable? Everything in traditional physics is completely predictable. Everything follows a set of rules, and every tiny little thing always affects the world in some way. Even these entirely digitized random number generators are using predictable physics to come up with these random numbers. And all of these calculations themselves, while you may think of them as digital, are really physical. Computer binary is just whether or not there's a physical electron in a transistor or not. Even human behavior is decided by physics. How tall are you? The taller you are, the longer it takes for signals of pain to reach your brain. Your brain is just neurons with electrical signals going in and out. Seeing or being affected by different things makes your brain release hormones. Hormones are chemicals. Chemicals that react to your brain in certain ways, making you feel the way you do. And depending on the physical build of your brain, will work in different amounts. So really, in essence, if you could know the physical build of everyone's brain, and where every single particle in their brain is, and how it's being affected at one instant, would you be able to accurately predict the entire future of mankind? Do we actually have free will?
Dude, this is a video about video games. Stop being so philosophical.
Alright, distant Italian. I'll hurry this along then. Yes, we may in fact have free will, because there is one thing, just one thing, that truly is random, and it involves quantum mechanics and half-lives. Oh, quantum mechanics, how long has it been? Since the goat tongue video? Yeah. Though this is still under debate, quantum particles may be the only truly chaotic force in the universe, meaning the most random. You should recognize this as an atom, with its electrons orbiting around it. Well, this is very inaccurate. Atoms don't actually have their electrons orbit them, in the way we traditionally think of an orbit. Instead, the electrons are moving around it very rapidly, and completely randomly. If you took a quantum measurement of an atom and pinpointed exactly where an electron is one instant, and then an instant later did so again, it would be in a completely different place. Do it again, and another completely different place. With absolutely no pattern. There's no way of knowing exactly where it's going to be next. And this is especially the case when you also involve radioactive decays, or half-lives. There's one Swiss laboratory that offers a service called Hotbits, and what it does is it measures the half-life of a particle. And because that's entirely random, they can then put that into a random number generator and get a truly, completely random number using half-lives. Come on, Hotbits, give me a number. 3. It gave me 3. 3. How random. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that when a game advertises that it has randomly generated maps, they are fundamentally lying to you. I mean, heck, the very existence of the scripts in the first place that alter the randomly generated map in any way completely trumps it in the first place. A truly randomly generated map would look something like this. Ugly and completely unplayable. But does this lying really matter? No. There are so many different seeds and possibilities that it doesn't really need to actually be random for it to be a new experience to us either way. And that really is the point of randomly generated maps, that they're different every time. And they are different every time, unless you use a seed. Odds are you will never get the same map twice. Heck, odds are no one in the next 1,000 years will get the same map. And it doesn't really matter if they just have a massive wall of code that's designed to make a number look random, because, as far as humans are concerned, it is.
But what about Minecraft?
Minecraft does it the same way as all the games I pretty much talked about. You just add a third plane. A third coordinate. A z-axis.
But everything is covered in sadness.